Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend, the DN WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If the darkest passions of every villain combined to create the ultimate dark messiah. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details, and go to the story link to say hi to the author. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now, let's get into the fanfic. Villains. Villains have always been regarded as the bad guys. No one ever gave a thought about how these villains came to be. Society just assumed they were born like this. But they weren't. Villains didn't become like this by choice. Villains were molded by the society that broke them, shunned them, forgot them. And now for centuries these souls have been repeatedly cast aside and forgotten. But they haven't been quiet in hell. Though they were dead, they still remembered what society had done to them. They were angry and began crying out in rage. It's been centuries, centuries of torment and anguish. But now all their work has come to fruition. Their pleas were heard, and it gave birth to something. Something evil. An embodiment of all their rage, all their anger, their desire for vengeance. All of these were inside one being, but it needed a host, a successor. They still need a successor. All for One had a successor, and it was Tenko Shimura. One for All had many successors, passing it down and entrusting it to the next generation, until it was passed down to Izuku Midoriya, its current holder. Now it was time for them to find a successor, and this is where this story begins. Line break. The sound of cameras flashing could be heard, as we see multiple cameramen and reporters eagerly looking at the man in front of them. This man is the No. 1 hero Deku, the symbol of peace and the ninth holder of One for All, but his friends know him as Izuku Midoriya. Izuku currently stood in front of many reporters, as he had called the press for an announcement he had to make. The reporters, cameramen, and as well as all of Japan were watching eagerly, waiting for Izuku to speak. Hello, Japan. I'm sure most of you already know who I am, and I'm sure you're all wondering what I have come to say. But for that I must tell you all a short story, Izuku says, as everyone watching listened silently. There was once a young boy, let's call him Wataru Hatano. He was born with a quirk like most have, but his peers called his quirk evil. This boy was discriminated a lot by his peers and teachers, yet he still strived to be a hero. I know this boy personally, and let me tell you, there were times he could have been a villain but didn't. He ignored his peers, worked hard, and you know what? It paid off. He proved all his peers wrong and became a hero. Izuku smiles, as he respected his friend, that thankfully didn't go down the path of villainy. Let me ask you all a question. How do you all think villains came to be? Izuku asks, the question resulting in many raising their hands, as Izuku points at a man from the crowd. The man then proceeds to stand up, before answering his question. They're born evil, obviously, the man said confidently, as most of the fellow reporters and journalists nodded in agreement, while some were just silent. I admire your confidence, but I must correct you. Villains aren't born. Sure, there are villains who only want to spread chaos and ruin, but there are those who are villains not by choice, but by circumstance. There are villains who've simply been wrong. These villains are just angry, Izuku explains, taking a deep breath, before speaking up once more. As a hero, it is my job to save lives and protect the innocent, but some villains are innocent too. That is why I stand in front of all you, not as a hero, not as the symbol of peace, but as a man, to ask all of you to help me. Help me save villains. Izuku's statement making many start whispering to each other, some even speaking up from the crowd. Why do we need to save villains? Yeah, they're the bad guys. They should be locked up. Yeah, many of the men and women shouts out, as Izuku shuts them all up by clapping his hands together using some force, making a small hurricane. Do I have your attention now? Izuku asks, as everyone nods and stays silent. I've been a hero for quite some time now, and one thing I realized ever since I was a child was that this society needs to change. So many villains have been made, simply because of the society that made them the way they are now. That is the reason why there are so many of them, Izuku explains, as a journalist from the crowd raises her hand to ask a question. Izuku then nods at the girl, signaling for her to speak up. So what do you propose we do? The question making Izuku smile. I'm glad you asked. My project. I have made a rehabilitation center for villains. Any and all villains caught or captured in action shall be sent there, where I will help rehabilitate them and integrate them back into society. But I can't do this all on my own. Like I said earlier, this current society needs to change. That is why I ask of you, all of you, stop discriminating against people who have what you deem evil quirks. There are no such things as evil or good quirks. It's all up to the person and how he or she uses them. So let's stop. No more bullying. No more discrimination. Help me change this society, Izuku finishes, as everyone all over Japan had been inspired by his speech and had started cheering. Timeskip. It had been quite some time since that day, and a lot has changed for the better. All the villains caught or captured in action are now all automatically sent to Deku's rehabilitation center. Many villains have been integrated back into society, getting their own jobs, some even starting their own families. Though at first most people have avoided those who've been rehabilitated, scared that they might revert back to their old ways, but eventually the civilians had warmed up to them. Now back to the present, which takes us to the front of a bar in the Camino ward. Inside the bar, we could see a couple sitting together and two other men sitting in front of them on the other side. To any bystander or civilian, these people would just look like normal citizens getting together. But unbeknownst to them, these weren't any ordinary citizens. 3 of them were former members of the League of Villains, and one was the infamous hero killer, Stain. It's been many years since the Love was defeated and Tamura Shigaraki, their leader, was killed and Stain was imprisoned in Tartarus. So it was quite a sight to see the 4 out and about. Now let us get a closer look at each one. Let's start with the couple, as we see 2 former members of the Love, the villains known as Dabai, also known as Toya Todoroki and Toga Himiko. After the death of Tamura Shigaraki, the remaining Love members were imprisoned in Tartarus, and when Izuku announced his project to rehabilitate villains and integrate them back into society, Dabai and Toga were one of the first recipients to be sent to Izuku's rehabilitation center. Dabai having been abused as a child by his father Inji Todoroki, also known as the former No. 2 and No. 1 hero, the Flame Hero. Endeavor had gotten quite close to Toga, even before getting imprisoned. The 2 villains had found many similarities between themselves, one being that both were abused by their parents, though for Dabai's case only his father. Toga was shunned and abused a lot as a kid, reason being her fascination with blood. With their similar pasts, the 2 had formed a close friendship, which blossomed into love during their time in Izuku's rehabilitation center. During the first few weeks, Dabai was not interested in changing, but Toga was, after Izuku had talked to her and helped her. So with some persuasion and time, Dabai as well wanted to change. The 2 are now living happily as a married couple in an apartment in the Shizuoka prefecture. Dabai is now working as a firefighter and Toga is working as a nurse in the local hospital. The 2 are also expecting a baby boy soon, as Toga is due in a week. Other than those 2, there was still the other 2 men sitting on the opposite side. Former League member, Kurogiri, and a man who used to be the infamous hero killer, Stain, also known as Chizoma Akaguro. After Tamura Shigaraki was killed, Kurogiri had no one else to give him commands, as he was a Namu who took commands from All for One, who is dead, and Tamura, who is also deceased. With no one left to serve, he just stayed silent in Tartarus, biding his time until he could die. Then came the day he was sent to Izuku's rehabilitation center, along with Dabai, Toga, and Stain. In the beginning, Kurogiri was very hesitant on trying to change, not talking much to anyone, only having short conversations with Dabai, Toga, and surprisingly Stain as well. But then the visits came. 2 men would often visit Kurogiri and talk to him. The 2 men were Shota Aizawa, also known as the Erasure Hero, Eraserhead, and Hisashi Yamada, also known as the Voice Hero, Present Mike. The 2 had visited Kurogiri frequently, trying to help their friend. After it was revealed that Kurogiri is a Namu made from the corpse of Oboro Shirakumo, a close friend of the 2 pro-heroes, Aizawa and Yamada tried every day to check in with him, hoping that their friend could still be in there, and fortunately he was. Apparently, Kurogiri had retained most of Oboro's personality, and though it took some time, Kurogiri had also gained his memories back from when he was Oboro. After all those, Kurogiri was very thankful to the 2, as well as Dabai, Toga, and Stain, as they also helped him out a lot, as he worked hard to change, and it worked well for him. Kurogiri is now happily teaching as a professor in Shiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiihe could find an opportunity to escape. Even when he was sent to Izuku's rehabilitation center, he knew Izuku is a true hero. But he knew that Izuku alone could not change this society. So he just bided his time until he could escape. Eventually, Stain had formed a friendship with Kurogiri, Toga, and Dabai during his time there, and after watching Izuku for quite some time and seeing his impact on the society, he felt something he hasn't felt in what feels like a lifetime. Hope. Stain had hope and faith that Izuku could actually change this society, and after a slight push from his friends and Izuku, he then knew that Izuku could actually achieve his goal, and in a peaceful way as well. That marked the day that Stain began to change. At first he thought he didn't deserve a second chance, but after having a talk with Izuku changed his mind. Stain was now working as a teacher at a local kindergarten. It surprised his friends when they had learned that the hero killer has a fondness for young children and puppies. Stain lived in his apartment with 4 puppies in Shinjuku. It was safe to say that the 4 former villains are living quite comfortably. We see Toga and Stain talking on the topic of blood, while Dabai and Kurogiri are simply catching up, as they see a waiter walking over to their table. The waiter then sees an extra 5th chair just standing in the far middle, beside both Kurogiri and Dabai. The waiter then proceeds to grab the 5th chair, as he finds a hand stopping him from doing so. We're still waiting for one more. He's coming a bit late, Dabai says, as the waiter then realizes his mistake and bows in front of the former villain. I'm very sorry, sir. The waiter apologizes, bowing as Dabai then makes him raise his head. It's fine, Dabai says, his voice sounding devoid of emotion, as the man scurries away, before Toga elbows her husband. Toya, cheer up. It's been so long since we've all had a reunion. Toga squeals, as Dabai groans in response. We just had a reunion a few months ago, when it was Kurogiri's birthday. Dabai groans facepalming, as his wife is always so cheery. He then chuckles, as that was also one of the countless things that made him fall in love with her. Meanwhile, Kurogiri and Stain are simply enjoying watching the sweet scene in front of them. The 4 friends continue to chat for a few minutes, until they hear the door to the bar open, showing the man they have been waiting for. At the entrance stood none other than Izuku Midoriya, also known as the No. 1 hero, the symbol of peace, Deku. Seeing Izuku, Toga instantly stood up cheerily, as she rushed Deku to give him a hug, as he returned the hug as well with a smile. Izuku-kun, it's been a long time. Toga squeals cheerily, hugging Izuku, as the other men just stay seated, but also greet their friend. Oi Midoriya, Dabai says lifelessly, nodding at Izuku, as he nods back as well. Greetings Izuku, it's been some time, Kurogiri says kindly, as Izuku smiles in response. Hello to you as well, Kurogiri, Izuku says smiling. As for Stain, he merely smiles and nods at Izuku as a greeting, to which Izuku replies with the same gesture, as Izuku walks over to his chair and takes a seat. After sitting down, Izuku then began to talk to all his friends and catch up. It may have been quite a surprise to know that Izuku is close friends with 4 former villains. 3 are former League members, and 1 was the hero killer. Though it isn't much a surprise for some who paid attention to Izuku closely, being the one who announced and founded the rehabilitation center. He was always there to talk and help the former villains there who would want to change and have a chance for redemption. As Izuku talked and laughed with his friends, he smiles brightly, as all his hard work and efforts had paid off. With his project, he has been able to integrate many former villains back into society, though there were those who didn't want to change, so they had to be imprisoned once again. There also hasn't been any villain activity in a while, so heroes haven't been needed in a while. But Izuku was fine with it. Maybe he could finally settle down with his wife, have kids. Unbeknownst to Izuku though, the society that he had worked hard to build was brittle and fragile. All it took was one mistake. One mistake was all it took to pave the way for a dark path, which now Izuku will find himself walking on, and he won't be able to stray from it. Chapter 1. Death. One day, that's all it took for everything that Izuku built to come tumbling down and his life to drastically take a turn, as he will find himself on a path he cannot stray from. == breaking news == bomb goes off in Shinjuku. Thousands dead. Hundreds injured. Suspects. Former villains who've entered the No. 1 hero, Deku's rehabilitation center. == breaking news == It was broadcasted all over Japan. The devastating news had affected everyone. Everyone was distancing themselves from any former villains they knew. Society's trust in the former villains was now gone. Japan was in chaos. Many had begun to go out on the streets in mobs trying to drive away the villains. As soon as the news had reached the authorities, the Supreme Court had issued a meeting to decide the punishment for the villains, not informing any of the heroes, even Izuku, and sentencing all former villains who had joined his center to death by hanging to be broadcasted to all of Japan for everyone to see. Meanwhile, Izuku was distressed and worried, as he swung through the buildings like Spider-Man with black tendrils emerging through his hands. Izuku was currently in a hurry, trying to get to Akaguro's home. After seeing the news, he had immediately left his home to check on his friends. His first destination, Goro's home, as he lived the closest to him. Swinging through the air, he brings out his phone from his right pocket and calls an old friend in the force, Naomasa Tsukachi. Izuku doesn't have much data on the situation and needs to get a grasp on what the hell is happening. Hello, Midoriya? A voice says, as Izuku puts his phone right beside his ear, still swinging in the air heading towards Stain's apartment. Tsukachi-san, I need your help, Izuku says urgently, as he nears his destination. Sure, Midoriya, what do you need from me? Tsukachi asks curiously. Japan is in chaos. From where I am, I can already see so many mobs outside their homes. I need to know what's the situation on your end. Tell me everything, Izuku says worriedly, as Stain's apartment comes into view. Oh, I was meaning to talk to you about that, I'm sorry, Midoriya. Which worries Izuku more, as he waits for him to continue. The higher-ups have sentenced all villains who went to your rehabilitation center to death by hanging. They believe the suspect is one of them. So they agreed on just killing them all regardless if they're innocent or not. Hearing those words, Izuku loses his signature smile, which he wears everywhere to reassure the civilians they're safe and sound, and hurries his pace even more now, just a few seconds away from Stain's home. Meanwhile, Sakachi was worried, not hearing anything from the other end except heavy breathing. Midoriya, are you there? Sakachi asks worriedly. But he doesn't get a response as Izuku inspects Guro's apartment, which he entered. His friend didn't seem to be home. Which means he must be. Izuku silenced his thoughts as he heard multiple police cars zooming by. Oh no. Sakachi-san, will call you back later. Keep me updated on the situation, Izuku says, leaving the apartment. Okay, I will. And Midoriya, Sakachi asks, concerned for his safety. Yeah? Stay safe, Sakachi says, as Izuku smiles. Of course, don't worry about me, Izuku smiles, before ending the call and hastily shoves the phone back into his pocket. Instantly after, Izuku starts running to the kindergarten that Guro works at, as that must be where his friend was, and he was right. Izuku found Stain. But you see, there was a slight problem. The kindergarten was on fire. Izuku glanced at Stain, who was holding a child in his arms, surrounded by many cops pointing their guns at him. Izuku immediately ran over to them and stood in front of the cops, shielding their view from Stain. Stop, stand down, put your guns down, Izuku orders. He was worried they were going to shoot Stain and harm the child. The cops, seeing the one hero right in front of them, complied and put their guns down. Who's in charge here? Izuku asks the cops in front of him, as a short man with a lean build and messy black hair walks toward him. I am. My name's Detective Levy, the man says, introducing himself, his voice a little nervous, being granted the honor to stand in front of the symbol of peace himself. May I ask why you and your men were pointing their guns at my friend and a child? Izuku asks, as Levy stutters nervously a bit before giving him a straight answer. Mr. Chisum Akaguro is a former villain who went to your rehabilitation center. We were ordered to arrest him and bring him along with the others who will be hanged in public. When we arrived, we saw Mr. Akaguro holding the child. We assumed the worst and labeled the child a hostage, Levy explains. Izuku nods in understanding before turning his attention to his friend and the child. Hello, little one. Come, don't worry, I won't hurt you, Izuku says soothingly, reaching out his hand, while crouching. The child looks up at Stain, who nods. Seeing the man who protected him nod, the kid walks over to Izuku and takes his hand. Izuku then smiles, holding the child's hand, before standing up straight. Stain, just go with them. I can convince the higher-ups to change their minds. I know you're innocent, as is everyone else, Izuku pleads his friend, knowing Stain might do something that will get himself killed. Stain's eyes looked serious, but behind his obvious ruse, you could see that he was worried, nervous, and sad. Stain grits his teeth, glaring at the cops, making most flinch and some take a step back. Deku. I knew this day would come. Sigh. Rehabilitation a second chance, Stain says, before looking up at the sky chuckling. I should have known this society won't ever accept us. It won't change that easily. The only language they'll understand is violence. I know I'm a dead man, but if I'm going to die, Stain says, before focusing his stare at the cops in front of him, pulling out daggers that seemed to be hidden within his civilian clothing. Stain knew his time had come, but he'll be going down fighting, not by hanging. After seeing Stain unsheath his weapons, the cops immediately brought their guns up again and aimed them at the former hero killer. Stain then nods at Izuku, a last farewell to his friend. Izuku then covers the eyes of the child he was holding. He didn't want the young boy to see this. I'm going to die my own way, Stain says, before rushing the cops with daggers in his hands. Fire, Levy orders his men. They all instantly obey his command and begin firing at Stain. No, cease fire, Izuku shouts, his voice laced with worry. But the cops did not listen and just kept firing. Stain hadn't fought in years. His skills had dwindled. His body had also deteriorated. If he could be half the man he was many years ago, maybe he would have won this fight. But he isn't, so he knew he couldn't win this battle. He still had some retained skills, and he was going to use them. Stain had managed to deflect and dodge many of the bullets, but some had found themselves lodged in his leg inside. That didn't seem to deter him though, as he kept his pace fast, still going. He threw some knives, managing to hit some men in the head bullseye, effectively killing them. He then rushed to the nearest cop and slashed his throat, before looking for the next closest target, making eye contact with one. Stain then was about to jump on him. But sadly for him, the unavoidable death he was ready for had found him first. Asterisk bang asterisk. The sound of the barrel of a standard-issue gun used by many detectives, firing, the bullet flying through the air, and hitting its target, Stain. The shooter. The owner of the gun that had ended the life of Chizome Akaguro. Detective Levi Ackerman. Izuku's eyes had widened, seeing his friend getting shot, Stain's body collapsing to the ground, a puddle of blood beginning to form. Izuku immediately rushed to his friend's side, holding his hand and applying pressure to the wound. Stain, don't talk, okay? I'll get help. Don't worry, everything will be alright, Izuku says, trying to hide the panic and worry in his voice, as Stain starts coughing out blood. Asterisk deep breath asterisk. Izuku. Stain whispers softly, as Izuku starts tearing up. Yes, Izuku said softly, wiping his tears that had begun to fall with his other hand, which was pointless, as more waves of tears began to fall with even more forming in his eyes. Stain then takes a deep breath and fights against the will of death trying to take him. He needed to say this. You're one of the only true heroes left in this world. That is why I trust you with being able to do what I have never been able to change this society. That's the embodiment of corruption, and Evely, no, you can do it. You are a good man. Midoriya Izuku, I'm honored to have personally known someone like you. It gave me hope that this society is not all bad. Don't ever change. That's my only wish, Stain says tearily, his voice straining at the end, as he grits his teeth, while clenching his fists with all his willpower, trying to defy death's call to him, holding on to his life a bit longer. And please, take care of my babies, Stain finishes, as he then gives up, feeling a great weight lifted from his chest. He had stopped fighting the call of death and accepted it. His breathing stopping and his hand falling lifelessly to the ground. Izuku, seeing this, let go of his friend's hand and breathed shakily before standing up. Don't cry, Izuku, now's not the time to mourn, you have to save the others. Izuku reprimands himself, as he begins to eavesdrop on some of the officers that had begun talking, after sending the injured to the hospital and wrapping up the dead corpses. Hey, did you hear? They're about to start the execution for all the villains. They're going to do it live in asterisk 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 and broadcast it to all of Japan. Great. When is it going to start? Let me check. Oh, they're about to begin in 10 minutes. We still have work to do here though. That was all Izuku needed to hear. He knew where that was and hurried to save his other friends from their demise. Using one for all, jumping up into the air paired up with float to go higher, then using Black Whip to fling himself off and to the live execution. Izuku was going at a supersonic speed, having the live execution come into view in a few seconds. Izuku uses float and hovers in the air to look for his friends. He sees the wooden platform, with 5 ropes in a knot, ready to hang. The hangman is walking into position, as the first 5 villains begin walking to inevitable deaths, as Izuku traces their path, finding a long line of men and women, all waiting for their turn. Izuku quickly finds his friends, as they were at the beginning of the line, going next after the first 5. Wasting no time, Izuku quickly landed in the middle of the execution area, stunning many of the civilians who were there to watch the execution, as well as the guards. Izuku ignores them and walks over to his friends. Some guards had tried stopping him, but after recognizing him as the #1 hero, they let him be. Seeing his friends cuffed, along with all these other innocent souls, angered Izuku, and what angered him even more was seeing some bruises on his friend's face, seeming like they had been treated roughly. Izuku grits his teeth, while clenching his fists, remembering Stain's death. Some tears start falling. Hey Izuku-kun, what are you doing here? Toga says cheerily. Even in this situation she could still act like this, seeing Izuku. I'm here to save you all. This is all wrong, just let me try to convince them to give you a proper trial. I know none of you are guilty, Izuku says. But Toga just looks over to her husband and Kirigiri, both of them nodding to her, as Izuku gets confused. Hey Izuku-kun, we decided we are not going to fight it. No one's going to believe any of us are innocent anyway, so Izuku-kun, please let us go through with it, okay? Toga says soothingly, like a mother trying to comfort her child, as Izuku lets his tears flow. He had failed them, he failed his friends, he couldn't save them. Izuku knew there was no way he could change their minds, but still. But Izuku tries to plead and change their minds. But his sentence gets interrupted, as Toga walks over to him and raises her arms, wiping Izuku's tears away. Hey Izuku-kun, don't worry, okay? We will be fine. Just promise me you'll protect our baby, okay? Toga says, smiling softly, as Izuku nods silently, with his head hung low. Toga then goes back into her place in the line. Oi Izuku, Dabai calls out for Izuku, who raises his head to look at him. Look after Shoto as well. Keep him out of trouble for me, Dabai says, his voice devoid of emotion as always. But it was different this time, as he was bidding farewell to a friend. Knowing he won't be able to hear those voices again, Izuku clenches his fists, blaming himself once more. Izuku, please don't blame yourself. You did all you could. You gave us all a second chance, when no one else did, and though it was for a short time, we were able to live peacefully. That's more than anything we could have ever asked for, and for that I owe you. We all do. It's been a pleasure to have been your friend, Kirigiri says, smiling. Though Izuku could not see it with the fog, he could tell he was smiling. It was then time for their execution. Dabai and Kirigiri had already begun walking to their place, as Izuku just began walking off, with his head low, tears streaming from his eyes. Then he hears someone shout, "Hey, Izuku-kun, what are you doing? You're a hero, aren't you? Smile." Toga shouts loudly, as she walks over to her position as well, getting ready to get hanged. Izuku then remembers his master, All Might, the former one hero and symbol of peace, telling him to smile and stand tall. Though the memory just saddens Izuku even more, as he stops walking as he reaches a pillar near the road. He was now far enough away from the execution to not be seen, but just enough so he could hear it. The sound of the platforms opening, as the bodies that were standing on top fell, getting hanged. The sound of his friend's death, a lone tear falling from his eyes to the ground he was standing on, as Izuku drives his fist to the wall on his right in anger. A huge dent visibly made, as Izuku made his way to the sidewalk, and began walking back to his home at a slow pace. It's been about an hour since then. Izuku had been walking quite slowly, trying to calm himself. While walking home, Izuku overheard the news from a nearby TV. Breaking news. We just got given some new information regarding the former villain's execution. It seems that there is a missing villain on the loose. But that is not all. It appears that the rabbit hero, Mirko, is found harboring this villain in her home. There is also a bounty issued by the Commission for anyone who can find and bring Mirko and this villain to the authorities. Please stand by, as we're waiting for more information. His wife's name was all Izuku needed to hear. He used one for all and jumped as high as he could and flew through the air at a supersonic speed, going to his home. Oh no, Izuku realizes that the villain they must have been talking about was Dabai and Toga's child, as he and his wife were babysitting him for the couple. Izuku then remembers what Toga said earlier. Just promise me, you'll protect our baby, okay? The memory just fueling his will. He goes even faster, and soon he could finally see his home. But there was something wrong. His house is on fire, and there is an angry mob standing outside. Rumi Izuku was even more worried now for his wife. He lands on the ground, alarming the mob. The crowd of civilians had begun forming a path for him. After seeing who he was, Izuku walked over to his front door, opened it, and began looking for his wife. Izuku walked around the house, checking each room and finding no one. Izuku then checked his and Rumi's room, finding the crib where he kept Hikari Todoroki, the child of Toya and Toga Todoroki. Izuku is now even more distressed, finding the crib empty. He then goes to check the kitchen. Izuku finds a trail of blood, increasing his worry, but he takes a deep breath, trying to calm himself before following the trail. Izuku came upon the end of the trail, and what he saw would forever haunt his nightmares. Rumi Midoriya, also known as the rabbit hero. Mirko, the love of his life. His wife laid lifeless on the floor, with a puddle of blood. The first thing Izuku did was immediately drop to his knees and cradle his wife's body in his arms, as he cried on his wife's body for hours without end. *timeskip*. Izuku had left his home, and was now making his way to the Pro Heroes Association's headquarters, after giving his wife and friends a proper burial. Seeing Deku, the front desk had let him in, and now Izuku stood in front of the president, Kayaba Akihiko. Deku, what a surprise. It's not every day one hero comes to see you. To what do I owe the pleasure of meeting you today? He says, smiling, as Izuku didn't respond and simply stayed silent for a few seconds, gritting his teeth. Why? Why did you issue a bounty on a child? Izuku asks, his voice sounding strained, as he was trying his best at keeping his anger in check. Oh, that. The child is an offspring of two villains. It's obvious the boy will go down the same path his parents did. It is better if we neutralize him before he develops his quirk, Kayaba explains, before sitting down and taking a sip from a glass that contained wine. As Izuku gets even angrier hearing his explanation and clenches his fists. I quit, Izuku says, as Kayaba spits out the wine he was previously drinking. What? You heard me. I quit. I can't be a part of this anymore. It had been a few days since the one hero, the symbol of peace, Deku, had resigned. It was now dark, late in the evening, and Izuku was still at his wife's grave, kneeling, mourning and grieving. Izuku was busy mourning when he heard it. Hello, Izuku, a sinister voice says, alarming Izuku as he raises his head, his eyes meeting two red beady eyes. It looked like a demon, a dark figure clad in a black cloak. Only its eyes and sinisterly crooked smile could be seen. Any normal civilian would be scared or frightened in this situation. But Izuku was, and by no means, normal. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" Izuku asks, narrowing his eyes, while also assessing his surroundings, getting ready for a fight. "I am the Vengeful One, and I know your name. Because I've been watching you for a while now, Izuku Midoriya," the demonic-looking figure says, as Izuku tenses up. "Are you a demon?" The question made the figure burst into laughter. "No, I am not a demon. I am far worse. I am a product of many forgotten souls crying out for vengeance, and I've been looking for a host to gain my powers for centuries," the figure explains. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" Izuku asks, getting curious now. "Tell me, Izuku Midoriya. Are you angry? Angry that this society is so corrupt and evil that it resulted in the death of the people you hold dear? Do you want vengeance? Because if you do, I can help you," the demon says, an arm coming out from his cloak and reaching out to Izuku. "All you need to do is take my hand, and you shall inherit my powers as well as merge with my spirit." "No thanks. This society may be corrupt and evil, but there's good as well. I know it, and getting revenge won't make me any better than the man who killed them," Izuku says, declining the offer. "As expected of the symbol of peace, your spirit is still strong, even now. No matter. Everyone's spirit gets broken sooner or later. Though I do wonder, which will break first, your spirit or your body? I guess we will see, won't we, Izuku? Ha." The demon chuckles evilly as it starts dissolving into the darkness, disappearing and leaving Izuku all alone in the night. Chapter 2. A second chance at peace. It's been many years since that day. Since Izuku had quit being a hero, since all those innocents were killed, since his wife was killed, that to this day no one knows how. You all would have initially thought Izuku would try to change this society, or become a vigilante like Stain, but sadly you are all wrong. It's been many years since that day, and Izuku never stopped grieving and mourning the loss of his wife and friends. Izuku disappeared, vanished, like he never even existed. Izuku now lives in an old house in Misatafu, Japan, near Aldera Junior High. Izuku has changed a lot over the years. Izuku was now more cold and distant. He never leaves his home, unless absolutely necessary. He isolated himself from the outside world, staying in his home to grieve, hopefully until old age took his life. Appearance-wise though, Izuku hadn't changed much, as he still kept himself fit and in shape. Now looking a bit bulkier, he also grew a beard, not bothering to shave it, as he was also not bothered to cut his hair, resulting in the long hair he had now, tied up in a man bun. We now find Izuku currently asleep on his bed, sweating profusely while tossing and turning while sleeping, as he is having a nightmare. I was wondering which would break first, your spirit or your body. I guess we'll see, won't we, Izuku? You failed them. You failed all of them, and now they're dead, because of you. A loud noise booms as Izuku springs up from his position, waking up from the dream he was having while breathing heavily and sweating quite a lot. Another dream, Izuku thought, as he stood up from his bed, stretching his arms, yawning and beginning to walk out of his room and to the dining area. Ever since that demon had visited him, Izuku has been having many nightmares about that moment, resulting in him having many sleepless nights because of it. Izuku was currently eating cereal, staring at an old photo that showed his wife smiling, when he heard the same noise that awoke him from his dream earlier. Izuku merely frowns for a split second, before resuming what he was doing earlier and continued eating his breakfast. But the loud noises didn't stop, being accompanied with loud screams coming from what sounded like young children. After a few seconds, Izuku couldn't take it anymore, and now stood up angrily, walking towards the door that led to the outside world, as he was prepared to stop the source of the noises that was interrupting his breakfast. Izuku then opened his door and began walking to the source of the noise, leading him to a nearby alleyway. What Izuku saw next triggered him and made him even angrier than he already was. A young boy was getting picked on by a group of boys who were similar to the young boy's age. But what triggered Izuku was their clothing. All these boys were wearing the Aldera Junior High uniform, which reminded him of his own experiences being bullied by his childhood friend, Kaken. Now's not the time to get flashbacks. Izuku shakes his head, scolding himself, as he then walks over to the boys. Izuku was about to scold them and drive them away, when he heard one of the boys speak. "You quirkless piece of shit. You'll never be a hero." It was at this time Izuku's anger had reached the boiling point, as he ran at this kid and punched him straight in the face. "Leave," Izuku says darkly, with malicious intent, as all it took was one word for the bullies to run away in fear. Izuku then turned away from the boys running, and got a closer look at the kid who was being picked on, and got reminded of himself. The boy looked weak and skinny, just like how he used to be before meeting All Might. He also had fluffy ocean blue hair and blue eyes with fair skin, and of course the boy was wearing the same uniform as his bullies. Izuku then helps the boy up. As he dusts him off, seeing Izuku, the young boy gave a big and cheerful smile. As Izuku widens his eyes, his smile reminds me of Izuku was about to think, but was cut off as the boy spoke. Mister, thank you for helping me, the boy says, smiling brightly. No problem, kid. Now can you tell me why those boys were bullying you? Izuku asks, as the boy scratches the back of his head sheepishly. Oh, that. His name is Zuki Akihiko. He and his friends started bullying me ever since I was diagnosed quirkless, the boy responds, as Izuku grits his teeth, hearing the boy's last name. It was a name he wanted to forget for a long time. Why don't you report them to your teachers? Izuku asks, raising a brow, though he already had an idea of why. Zuki's father is the president of the Pro Heroes Association, so the teachers let him do whatever he wants, the boy says, as Izuku asks a question that he immediately regrets. What about your parents? Do they know about this? Izuku asks, as the boy's smile suddenly turns into a frown. I don't have parents, the boy says, sadly frowning, as Izuku just stayed silent. The sound of the wind blowing, trees rustling, cars zooming, civilians walking could be heard, as there was no sound coming from the two. Hey mister, the boy says, breaking the silence, getting Izuku's attention. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? The boy asks sadly, thinking Izuku would say no, but that was not the case. Izuku felt like he was reliving the same moment decades ago, when he was 14 and asked All Might the same question. Izuku looked deep into the boy's eyes and saw the exact same spark he had when he was aspiring to be a hero like his idol. Izuku knew he couldn't mess this up and took a deep breath. Though power helps a hero do his job, it's the will and courage to act when no one else does. That's what makes a hero, Izuku says, as the boy's eyes widen and begin to tear up. Tell me, kid, why do you want to be a hero? Izuku asks, as the kid smiles brightly. I want to be a hero because I want to be like my idol, Deku. I want to be a hero who saves everyone with a smile just like him. The boy says aloud, smiling brightly, as Izuku smiles, something he hasn't done in a long time. Then back to your previous question. Yes, even you can become a hero, Izuku says, smiling, as the boy starts crying and crouching down. Those were the words the boy has wanted to hear ever since he was diagnosed quirkless, as he then continued to sob on the ground. With a newfound determination and hope, the boy wipes his tears away and stands up, looking at Izuku in the eye. Mister, thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. The boy thanks Izuku, thankful for his kind words. Anytime, kid, Izuku says, as he thought this was his cue to leave and began walking away, when he heard the kid begin to panic. Oh wait. How will I even get stronger? Where do I even start? Can I even do this? The boy mumbles aloud, continuing to get more negative thoughts, before he gets snapped back to reality by Deku. Hey kid, Izuku says, getting the boy's attention, as he realizes Izuku was still there and gets embarrassed. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a habit of mine, the boy apologizes, scratching the back of his head sheepishly, as Izuku chuckles, another thing he hasn't done in quite a while, realizing he's doing many things he hasn't done in a while today, and he's about to do more. It's all fine. Hey kid, since you want to be a hero, how would you like to be my student? I used to be a hero, and I could teach you a thing or two, Izuku offers, as the boy looks at him in disbelief. Really? The boy asks, as Izuku nods in response. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The boy repeats over and over, rushing to hug Izuku, as he gets caught off guard. Izuku didn't see it coming and was surprised, but eventually warmed up to it, hugging the boy back, as well patting the child's head. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable, mister, the boy apologizes, after pulling away from the hug. It's fine, Izuku says, as suddenly the boy gets jumpy and looks worried. Oh no, I have to go back home, it's getting late. I'm sorry, mister, the boy says, realizing it was getting dark. No, it's fine, I understand. Go home. We'll begin your first lesson tomorrow after school, Izuku says, waving the boy off. Okay then, I'll see you tomorrow then, mister, the boy says, walking off, waving goodbye to Izuku. Izuku, Izuku shouts, as the boy turns around confused. Call me Izuku, Izuku says, making it clear for the boy, as he smiles. Okay, bye Izuku-sensei. My name is Hikari, Hikari shouts, waving Izuku goodbye once more, before running off. Hikari went home that day, looking forward to tomorrow, to have his first lesson. Izuku went home, looking forward to the following day to teach the young boy. Both were looking forward to the next day, and rightfully so, as the following day would prove to be the beginning of something amazing for the two. For Hikari, he would find a mentor and a possible father figure he's always wanted his whole life. For Izuku, a second chance. A second chance for something that was taken away from him, and something he has longed to have once more. Chapter 3. Father and Son Moments. It's been a year since Izuku had started training Hikari. Both Izuku and Hikari grew closer and closer each day they spent together. Izuku eventually saw Hikari more than a student, and as his son. Izuku not only trained Hikari, but also helped him in anything he needed help with, talking to him, being there for him, not only as a teacher, but as a friend. Hikari had grown stronger since that day, thanks to Izuku's training, but deep inside he had not changed much. Still the same boy who wants to be a hero, who could save everyone with a smile like his idol. Though, Hikari was not the only one who changed. Izuku had changed a lot as well in the course of a year, all thanks to his student. Izuku had become less cold and distant, beginning to become more and more like the man he used to be. Now it was the present. We could see Izuku panicking, walking back and forth in his backyard, waiting for Hikari to come like usual. Izuku was nervous, as he had thought it over a lot, and had come to a conclusion. He wants to adopt Hikari, and is planning on asking the boy once he comes. Izuku was mumbling some inaudible words, when he heard the doorbell ring on his front door, meaning Hikari was there. Izuku begins to walk over to the door, while also panicking on the inside. You can do this. You can do this. Izuku kept repeating that in his head to pump himself up, as he opened the door revealing Hikari. The scrawny and skinny boy that Izuku knew a year ago was no more. In front of him stood a more muscular and taller boy with a lean build, result of the harsh training he underwent. Hello Hikari, Izuku greets his student, before letting the boy inside his home. Hello Izuku-sensei. What kind of training will I have today? Hikari asks excitedly, curious, and also ecstatic to begin his next lesson. Actually, before we start today's lesson, there is something I've wanted to ask you for a while now, Hikari, Izuku says nervously, getting ready to say what he has wanted to say for a while now. Hikari, ever since I met you on that alleyway, my life changed for the better. I had lost a lot before meeting you and thought that I wouldn't be able to move on. But our time together proved me wrong. All our time together, the laughs we shared, the tears we shed, it gave me a second chance, another chance at happiness. I know you thank me a lot for helping you, but you have no idea how much you've helped me. If I never met you, I don't know where I would be right now, and through all our times together, I got closer and closer to you, caring for you as if you were my own son. I know I'm stalling because I'm nervous, so I'll just say it. Hikari, would you like to be my son? Izuku asks, as Hikari begins to cry and kneels down clutching his chest tightly. Izuku, seeing this, immediately ran to his student's aid and hugged him. Hey, it's okay, don't cry. You don't need to cry, I'm here. I'm here, Izuku says soothingly, hugging Hikari tightly. After a few seconds, Hikari stops crying and wipes his tears away, before pulling away. Yes, Izuku-sensei, I want to be your son. I've also wanted you to be my dad for a while, but I was too scared to ask, Hikari says smiling, as Izuku hugs Hikari once again. You don't need to call me Izuku-sensei anymore. You can just call me Papa, okay? Izuku says, after pulling away. Hikari nods in response. Okay, Papa, Hikari says, smiling brightly. Timeskip *. June 19th. Father's Day. It was Father's Day, and Hikari wanted to do something special for his dad, but he didn't know what to do. Hikari then got an idea, while he was walking around the house, coming across an old photo of Izuku with Mirko, his former classmates, Kurogiri, Stain, Aizawa, Hisashi, Toga, and Dabai, his parents. Hikari knew who all of them were, as Izuku had told him everything about his past, wanting to be truthful to his son. Hikari's reaction when he knew his dad was his idol ever since he was young was priceless. Izuku had taken a picture of it. Izuku had also told him about his real parents, and how Izuku knew was that he asked for a DNA test using Hikari's blood. When the results came out that Hikari was actually the child of his friends who he thought was lost, Izuku was ecstatic, and had become happy he could fulfill his friend's wish. At first Hikari was a little scared, having the revelation that his parents used to be villains. But after Izuku told him stories about them, he grew to like his parents more and more, even if they were gone, and hoped that he would meet them again one day. Hikari knew that Izuku still missed them all dearly, all his former classmates, teachers and friends. So his idea was to make Izuku feel like he was reliving the exact moment in the old photo he saw, by reenacting it and making copies of the people in the photo. That is why now we find Hikari standing in the backyard, which looked exactly like it was in the old photo, with cardboard cutouts of all the people in the photo, with a cake in the middle, waiting for Izuku to come home and see the surprise. Hikari waited for a few minutes, until he heard the door opening, meaning his dad was coming inside. Izuku knew it was Father's Day, but he did not expect this at all. He had opened the door to the backyard seeing cardboard replicas of all his former classmates, friends and even his teachers, along with his son, there standing in the middle. Happy Father's Day, Papa, Hikari shouts loudly with glee, smiling brightly, as he runs at Izuku, giving him a big hug. It took Izuku a few seconds to recover from the shock, and when he did, he began crying in happiness, hugging Hikari back tightly, patting his head. What is all this? Izuku asks, wiping his tears away, after separating from the hug. Hikari then pulls out the old photo he came across from his pocket, and shows it to Izuku. Oh, I realized that you probably miss all of them. So I tried remaking the moment like in this photo to let you know that, though they may be far away, they'll always be here in your heart, Hikari explains, going to the middle of all the cardboard and smiling. Home, Hikari says, as Izuku tears up once again, before Hikari reaches his hand out. Come, Papa, let's take a picture together, Hikari says, but Izuku just shakes his head in response. Later, let me take a picture of you first, Izuku says, bringing out his phone, as Hikari goes into position and smiles for the camera. After taking the picture, Izuku took many other pictures with his son, before they began eating the cake. Izuku had a lot of fun overall, and he was very happy that his son went through all this for him. Izuku was sitting down beside Hikari, as they were eating the last slice of cake, when he hugged his son again, crying. Thank you for today, son, Izuku says, hugging Hikari tightly. Anytime, Papa, you deserve it, Hikari says, hugging his dad, just as tight and crying as well. The father and son hugged each other for a few minutes, before pulling away. I love you, son. I love you, Papa. Timeskip. Hikari gets bullied a lot, even with his training. He was no match against Zuki, so he would occasionally come home bruised with a few cuts. But this time Zuki went a little too far. Izuku's first reaction, seeing his son come home with multiple bruises and wounds, was immediately taking his son in his arms, carefully bringing him to his room, so he could heal his wounds. After Izuku had finished stitching up his son's wounds and putting ice on his bruises, Hikari began to cry. I'm sorry for worrying you, Papa, Hikari sobs uncontrollably, as he felt that he failed Izuku by getting hurt, even with his teaching and training. I'm sorry for being weak, Hikari apologizes repeatedly while sobbing, as Izuku embraces his son in a tight hug. Hey, don't cry. I am here, Izuku whispers soothingly, hugging his son. You're not weak. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known. Even more than me, Izuku says reassuringly, still hugging his son, as Hikari keeps sobbing. But I failed you, Hikari was about to protest, as Izuku cut him off. No, you didn't, and so what if you did? Izuku asks, as he pulls away from the hug and wipes Hikari's tears away. Do you know why we fall? Izuku asks his son, who responds by shaking his head, not knowing the answer. So we can learn to pick ourselves back up. Right now you may not be able to, and that's fine, because I'll be here with you every step of the way. Don't you remember my promise? Izuku says, as he hugs his son once again. I promised to protect you until my dying breath, and that's exactly what I plan to do. So you won't need to worry, I am here. Timeskip. Hey, Papa, I'm going to be late for school, Hikari protests, as he was being hugged by Izuku. I'm sorry, I'm just excited. It's your birthday tomorrow, Izuku apologizes, pulling away from his son. It was going to be Hikari's 15th birthday tomorrow, so Izuku was very excited for it. I know, Papa, I'm excited too, but I have to go to school now, Hikari says, as Izuku chuckles. Oh, all right, have fun at school, Izuku says, giving his son one last kiss goodbye on the cheek, before Hikari starts walking off, heading to school. Bye, Papa, love you, Hikari shouts, waving at Izuku, before running off to school. Bye, Hikari, love you too, Izuku shouts back, waving at his son, before going back inside his home. Izuku then began to prepare for Hikari's birthday, while waiting for his son to come back home. Everything was great. Finally, Izuku was happy and at peace. Unbeknownst to Izuku though, his son was not coming home that day. Chapter 4. A Broken Hero. Izuku was now worried. He has been waiting for many hours and his son was still not home, when his son was supposed to be home 3 hours ago. It was now early in the evening and Hikari was still not home, so Izuku decided to go out and look for his son when he heard his phone ring. Ring. Izuku picked it up instantly, thinking that it was his son calling, but to his dismay, it was Tsukachi. Midoriya, are you there? Yes, I am here. Can you tell me what's the reason for calling me at this hour? Izuku asks urgently, as he was in a hurry to end the call, so he could start looking for his son. I need you to come here. There's something you need to see, Tsukachi says urgently, with a hint of sadness laced in his voice, which doesn't go unnoticed by Izuku. Why? Izuku asks nervously. I think it's better if you see it for yourself. It has something to do with your son. Hearing this, Izuku was now more motivated to know where Tsukachi is. Where? At asterisk 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 Tsukachi says, as Izuku recognizes the location, because it was nearby Aldera Junior High. Wasting no time at all, Izuku hung up the phone and immediately went to the location. Izuku ran as fast as he could, using some percentage of 1 for all to boost himself, reaching the location within a matter of minutes. There were multiple police cars parked and police tape showing surrounding the obvious crime scene that laid there. Izuku was very nervous, but swallowed the lump in his throat as he began to walk toward the crime scene, seeing a body vaguely, but not being able to identify it. Wanting to get a closer look, Izuku attempts cross the police tape only to get halted by Naomasa Tsukachi himself. "Let me through," Izuku says softly. But you could tell he meant it, as if it was an order, not a request. "Midoriya," Tsukachi says, thinking he could reason with the man, but gave up and sighed, before letting Izuku pass through. Izuku cut through the police tape and got closer to the crime scene, finally seeing the body close up. "That's my son." Izuku immediately ran to it. Seeing the dead corpse laying on the ground was his son. "That's my boy." Izuku cradled his son's body in his arms and began to cry. He didn't want to believe it. Somewhere deep inside him, before arriving at the scene, thought his son could have gotten hurt or died. But he hoped. He hoped against all odds that his son was not dead. But here he was holding his son's lifeless corpse in his arms and cried. Izuku didn't care if the cops told him to leave the crime scene. He didn't care if he was breaking the law. All he cared about was being there and holding his son as he cried. "I promise to protect you until my dying breath, and that's exactly what I plan to do. So you won't need to worry. I am here. I love you, Papa." Izuku was getting flashbacks of all his memories with his son, as well as how he met his son on the alleyway all those years ago. Remembering his son's voice, Izuku began to cry even harder on his son's body. "Just promise me you'll protect our boy, okay?" Toga's words hitting him like a knife to his heart, as he sobbed on his son's chest. "I failed you," Izuku cries out in guilt. "You trusted me and I failed you," Izuku cries out, before sobbing again once more. Izuku stayed there, cradling his son's body, crying on it for a few minutes, before he was approached by Tsukachi, who stood beside him. Izuku stopped crying, wiping his tears away, standing up, as he breathed shakily, letting a few tears trickle down his face. "Midoriya, I promise you, we will find whoever did this," Tsukachi says, trying to reassure Izuku, as he merely nodded. Izuku then buried his sadness, grief and guilt, replacing it with rage. Breathes shakily. "I know who did this," Izuku says darkly, gritting his teeth and clenching his fists, as he began to walk out of the crime scene, hearing Tsukachi's voice fading. "Izuku, don't do anything rash," were the last words Izuku heard faintly, before walking too far away, unable to hear his friend's warnings, as he frankly didn't give a fuck. Izuku then began to walk faster and faster, before speeding up even more, running as fast as he could towards his destination, the Pro Heroes Association's headquarters. Izuku reached his destination quickly, as he ran past the security and went to look for Kayaba Akihiko. Izuku ran as fast as he could to Kayaba's office at the highest floor. "Sir, you can't be in here," a man said, as he was about to reach Kayaba's office. Izuku didn't talk and merely responded with punching the man straight in the face, effectively knocking him out with no remorse, and Izuku didn't care. He was angry. Izuku then kicked the door to Kayaba's office open, getting ready, and activates 1 for all, green electricity dancing on his body as he entered. Izuku sees the office empty. Seeing that there was no one there, he hears the sound of an elevator dinging. He rushes out of there, seeing someone using the elevator to go to the rooftop of the building. It was a child, assuming it was Zuki, the boy who killed his child. Izuku rushed to the elevator and pressed the button to go to the rooftop. As Izuku reached the top, he left the elevator immediately, seeing the child standing in front of him. His suspicions were right. The child standing in front was Zuki Akihiko. Izuku gripped his hands tightly, not speaking, before rushing the child, preparing to avenge his son. Zuki, seeing Izuku, tried to run away from Izuku, but was futile. As Izuku was about to reach Zuki, he suddenly collides with metal, hitting his body and halting his advance. Izuku then realizes what has happened, looking around his surroundings, seeing himself trapped in a huge steel cage. Izuku then sees Zuki right in front of him, with the cage separating him from his son's killer. "You think this will hold me?" Izuku screams in anger, glaring hardly at the boy in front of him, while gripping the steel cage. "You made a mistake killing my son. When I get out of here, and I will, you're going to die." Izuku screams at the child, emitting bloodlust that would make even a foe tremble, as Zuki stood there paralyzed. "You are right, me son made a mistake, but not as serious as your fear coming here all alone." A voice that Izuku had not heard a long time echoes from behind him. Izuku then turns around slowly, meeting the gaze of the man whose voice it belonged to. The man who caused the death of his wife and friends, Kayaba Akihiko. Kayaba Akihiko, Izuku says, now focusing his glare and anger on the new arrival. Now, let's not stand on ceremony, Heretiku, Kayaba says, beginning to walk forward slowly toward Izuku. Izuku does the same, getting ready to fight and tries to activate One for All, when he finds out he can't. The look of confusion on his face triggers Kayaba to burst into a fit of laughter. Your quirk is not working, I assume. Well, that's the effect of the quirk dampeners embedded into this steel cage we both find ourselves in. I can't have you fighting me with that now, would I? That would just be unfair, so let's fight without our quirks. What do you think, Deku? Kayaba says, as Izuku just clenches his fists and grits his teeth, before continuing his approach to Kayaba. I don't need my quirk to beat you, Izuku says angrily, walking towards Kayaba. While Izuku seemed confident on the outside, he was actually very weary of his opponent. Kayaba Akihiko was known for many things. Just being the Pro Heroes Association's president is one of them. He was not able to get to that position just because of money, but also because of his strength and power. The two then kept walking towards each other till they were right in front of each other, as Izuku began the battle by throwing the first hit, punching Kayaba straight in the chest, then raising his right arm, bringing it down on Kayaba's face, before quickly raising it, delivering a strong uppercut to his chin. Izuku then delivers a backhanded punch to Kayaba's face, before throwing another punch at Kayaba, which unfortunately he catches easily. Peace has cost you your strength, Kayaba says, holding Izuku's fist, taking note of Izuku's punch being quite weak, as Izuku throws another punch with his free hand, which Kayaba catches as well. Deep down, Izuku knew it as well. Although he kept his body in shape, his skills and strength has dwindled considerably throughout the years. Retirement has made you weak, Kayaba says, before taking one of the fists that he caught and uses it to hit Izuku in the face, before delivering a strong kick to his chest, making Izuku take a few steps back, as the battle continues to rage on. All that could be heard were the hits and grunts of the two men as they fought. Kayaba threw an uppercut, which he successfully delivered to Izuku's face, before Kayaba tries to throw another punch from the side, which Izuku catches with his two hands and tries to get control of the fight, delivering a headbutt to Kayaba's face, as it was now his turn to take a few steps back. Izuku then walks toward Kayaba, screaming in anger, as he was using his anger to fuel him and channels it into his hits, instead of letting it control him. Izuku then throws a barrage of punches at Kayaba's face, throwing punch after punch relentlessly, without rest. But Kayaba halts the barrage of attacks eventually, catching one of his fists, before giving Izuku a backhanded slap and delivering a strong kick to Izuku's chest, sending Izuku flying, as he halts it by digging his feet into the ground. Recovering from the blow, Izuku tries to run at Kayaba, which turned out to be futile, as Kayaba was immediately in front of him, and before Izuku could process, Kayaba grips his neck tightly, carrying him up by his neck, but was short-lived. Izuku was able to escape from the hold Kayaba had on his neck, punching Kayaba's right arm away and punching his face. Kayaba responds by delivering a punch to Izuku's chest and tries to throw another punch at him, but gets caught by Izuku. Izuku then delivers a quick uppercut to Kayaba's face, before taking his other hand holding Kayaba by the back of his neck, as he used his other hand to deliver a barrage of punches at Kayaba's chest, grunting at each punch, pouring all his anger into them. After the barrage of attacks, Izuku takes both of his hands on Kayaba's head and brings his head down, colliding it with his knee. Kayaba quickly recovers from the blow and jumps up, bringing his fist down on Izuku's head, giving him a slight concussion and making Izuku collapse to the ground. Before Izuku could stand up, Kayaba kicks him in the gut, making Izuku scream in pain, as he crawls back trying to distance himself away from Kayaba, before standing up and bringing his fists up. Izuku then tries to throw a punch at Kayaba, but he was too fast, as Kayaba ducks, avoiding the punch and delivers a strong uppercut to Izuku's gut, then throwing a punch at Izuku's face, successfully colliding his fist to his face, before crouching down and punching Izuku's legs, making Izuku get down on his knees. As Izuku was down on his knees, Kayaba kicks Izuku in the chest, sending him flying. Izuku stands up weakly, panting hardly, as he was feeling pain all over his body, as well as getting tired. Izuku felt weak, but he disregarded his pain and kept on going, throwing a punch at Kayaba. But he catches it and punches Izuku's side, before gripping Izuku's neck tightly, raising his body up by his neck once again. While gripping his neck, Kayaba then throws numerous punches at Izuku's side, as he grits his teeth, absorbing the pain. After the barrage of hits, Kayaba throws Izuku's body away like a doll, as the former symbol of peace stands shakily, before running at Kayaba and toppling him. Izuku was not on top of Kayaba, as he then began to throw a series of punches at his face, mercilessly without rest. Eventually, Kayaba found a pattern in his punches and catches one of his fists, stopping the series of punches, before delivering a strong headbutt to Izuku's head, making the former hero take a few steps back to regain his bearings. "You fight like a younger man," Kayaba says, praising Izuku on his skills, even after all these years, which seemed to make Izuku still quite a formidable foe. As Kayaba stood up from his previous position, with nothing held back. Admirable, but mistaken, Kayaba finishes, as Izuku tried yet again to run at Kayaba, but was unsuccessful, as Kayaba stopped him by gripping his neck, when he came close enough and carried Izuku's body up, before slamming Izuku's body to the ground. While Izuku was on the ground, Kayaba continued his attacks, throwing a series of punches at Izuku, to make sure the former symbol of peace wouldn't get up. After the series of punches, Kayaba was sure Izuku was down, so he began to walk off, but not too far, so Izuku could hear him. "Midoriya Izuku, for years you have been a nuisance, a thorn on my side, and I thought that having your friends and wife killed could get rid of you. But I was wrong. So now I know what I must do, and what I should have done all those years ago." Kayaba trails off, as Izuku, with all his sheer willpower, stands up shakily and prepares to continue the fight. But Kayaba was now preparing to end it. "Ah yes. I was wondering what would break first," Kayaba says, catching Izuku's fist, before delivering a right uppercut to his chest, and then punching his face for good measure. "Your spirit," Kayaba says, putting both his hands on Izuku's back, before carrying his body up, till it was above his head. "Or your body," Kayaba finishes, before bringing Izuku's body down fast, back first onto his knee, colliding his back with it. Asterisk crack asterisk. The sound of Izuku's spine breaking echoes throughout the cage, as Kayaba then walks off and looks over to his son, who had been watching the fight along with his personal bodyguards. "Take him to the pit," Kayaba instructs them, as the steel cage begins to open up, and the guards begin to walk over to Izuku's body, and carries it up, walking away. Rain then began to pour, as it was almost like a sign. The symbol of peace was now broken, though no one would ever know it, except Kayaba Akihiko, his son, and a certain demon far away, who was watching the whole fight transpire, laughing evilly, as the demon dissolves into the shadows. Chapter 5, The Pit. "Ah yes, I was wondering what would break first, your spirit, or your body." "Papa." "Ag," Izuku screams, opening his eyes and waking up with a jolt, before seeing he was not on a bed, as he was thinking the previous events that had transpired were just a nightmare. But unfortunately for him, they weren't. Izuku tries to move any of his arms, but sees they're chained up, as well as his legs and entire body. He then tries to move slightly, but regrets it, feeling an agonizing pain coming from his spine, as he remembers his fight with Kayaba. Izuku looks around, seeing he was in quite a small room, shrouded in darkness. The only source of light came from in front of him, as he saw a reinforced steel door with a window, through which a small amount of sunlight goes through. Izuku tries to analyze and observe his surroundings, as he thought he would be brought to Tartarus, but it seems he wasn't. Izuku was thinking either he was sent to a facility, not as bad as Tartarus, or one much, much worse. But considering his luck, he was leaning more towards the latter. Izuku's thoughts get interrupted though, as the sounds of a keypad being pressed is heard, before the door in front of him opens, revealing the man himself, Kayaba Akihiko, standing there with his usual suit and grin. It took all of Izuku's will to hold himself back from breaking the chains he found on himself and choking Kayaba, as the man he hates with his whole being stood in front of him. After entering, Kayaba closes the door behind him, then walking closer to Izuku, not speaking any words, as he stared at Izuku's eyes, which were filled with sadness, hate, and regret. "Did you know that it brought me so much joy, seeing all those villains being hanged, including your friends? They were all scum, so they deserved it anyway," Kayaba says, breaking the silence, as Izuku merely glared at Kayaba. But he ignored it and continued to speak. "Do you know how your wife died?" Kayaba asks out of the blue, as Izuku just continued glaring at him. "No, I see. Miss Nagant. Would you please be a dear and reveal yourself?" Kayaba says, as a figure reveals itself from the shadows. Izuku's eyes widen seeing the woman standing in front of him. Lady Nagant, an infamous assassin who worked for the Commission, killing everyone she was tasked to assassinate, all except one, Izuku Midoriya. Lady Nagant was once tasked to assassinate the hero, but failed, as Izuku defeated her in battle, having her arrested in Tartarus. Knowing the many evil deeds the Commission has done, Izuku worked hard to dismantle them, and he did, many years ago during his prime. Izuku was stunned for a few seconds, because of not noticing Lady Nagant's presence from earlier, indicating that his skills have dwindled quite a lot. But his surprise didn't last long, as he went back to glaring at Kayaba. "Ah, there she is. You must be wondering how she's here, as she was imprisoned in Tartarus." Am I right? Kayaba asks Izuku, as he just keeps glaring at him. Well, I've known about the commission's success with Miss Nagant here for quite some time, and I thought it would be a waste if such a valuable asset would be locked up. Kayaba praises Lady Nagant, as he had her bailed out. Meanwhile, Nagant just stood there silently, with a stoic expression. Now, back to my previous question. I'll answer it for you. Miss Nagant here is the one who killed your wife. It was quite easy really, but I must commend your wife, as she lasted longer than the others Miss Nagant has assassinated. As I've been told, Kayaba says, as a dawn of realization sets on Izuku's face. Despair and regret evident in his eyes as they widen. Izuku remembered Nagant's last words to him. I'll make you wish you killed me. The words now making him feel even more guilty than before, tears starting to form. But he holds them in and continues to glare at Kayaba. So your friends. Dead. Kayaba recaps the deaths of those Izuku lost, as each word hit him like a knife to the heart. As he stopped glaring at Kayaba and put his head down, closing his eyes, trying to hold back his tears. You wife. Dead. Who's next? Kayaba wonders out loud, before snapping his fingers. Ah yes, your son. You see, I can't really blame my son for your son's death. From what I've gathered, your son was quirkless, correct? Yet he still wanted to be a hero. He was probably too weak. He would have gotten himself killed in action if he continued to chase his dreams anyway, Kayaba says, reminding Izuku of all those he loved dearly taken from him. Izuku couldn't take the pain anymore and raised his head. What are you doing? Izuku asks, his voice sounding devoid of emotion. I thought that was obvious. I'm trying to break you. Why don't you just kill me? Izuku asks, as he was more than ready to accept his death, so that he could be reunited with his friends, wife and child once more. Because that would be boring. You don't fear death, you welcome it. I've already broken your body. I want to break your spirit now, Kayaba says, with a sadistic grin creeping up his face. Where am I? Izuku asks, as this prison was obviously not Tartarus, changing the topic. Responding to his question, Kayaba turned his back on Izuku and walked over to the door, looking up at the window which gave a view of sunlight and a way to escape. Your new home, where you will learn the truth about despair and hopefully, where I will finally break you. There's a reason why this prison is the worst hell on earth. Hope. Every man who has rotted here over the centuries has looked up to the light, imagined breaking their chains and climbing to freedom. So is this so simply like shipwrecked men turning to sea water from uncontrollable thirst? Kayaba says, as he turns around to look at Izuku and walking back towards him. Many have died, Trinno. I know you're not like the rest of the men who've rotted here. You don't want to escape, you want to die. But I won't let you. I will visit you here every day to make little cracks to your spirit, until I finally break it, Kayaba says, looking deep into Izuku's eyes. Why are you doing this? Izuku asks, hearing Kayaba's plans for him, as the man in question bursts into laughter. Why does anyone do anything? Sheer, absolute boredom, Kayaba says, laughing like a madman. Your smile has always irritated me. Midoriya Izuku, the symbol of peace, the hero who would always save everyone with a smile. I've always dreamed of wiping that smile off your face and breaking your spirit. I've always wanted to see the famed symbol of peace broken in every sense of the word. It just excites me, gives me entertainment, Kayaba says, grinning sadistically, before his demeanor changes into a more serious one, as he walks closer to Izuku and putting a hand on his cheek, while looking deep into his eyes. Then when it is done, when you have finally broken, Kayaba says, his voice sounding dark and sinister, while looking into Izuku's eyes. Then you have my permission to die, Kayaba finished, as his demeanor comes back to his usual cheery one and turns his back on Izuku, walking to the door. Oh, I have a party to attend soon, so I must be going now. See you later, Deku, Kayaba says cheerily, waving at Izuku, before opening the door and gesturing for Lady Nagant to exit first. Ladies first, Kayaba says, as Lady Nagant scoffs, before walking out. Kayaba then waves farewell to Izuku once more, before leaving as well and locking the door behind him, leaving Izuku all alone in the darkness. Chapter 6. Rising from the Ashes. It has been a few months since Izuku was imprisoned in the pit, and he was still holding on. He was looking a bit haggard, but other than that he seemed quite fine. On the inside though, that's where his torment and suffering was occurring. The mental torture Kayaba had put him through was extreme, as he tried everything for months without end to make him break. Being honest, Izuku wanted to break, so his suffering could end. But his spirit, the fire deep inside his heart, kept burning, and didn't let him snap. The daily torture session had just ended, as we can see Izuku panting uncontrollably, keeping his head down. Izuku couldn't take it anymore, all this pain. He just wanted it to end, so he could be reunited with his loved ones. His wife, his son, his friends. But he wouldn't break. His spirit was still burning strong, and he hated it. Izuku then began to sob quietly, but was short-lived, as a sinister laugh resonated throughout his cell. A figure forming from the shadows revealing the vengeful one. The same demon who visited Izuku years ago. Izuku didn't need to lift his head, as he recognized the figure's presence and couldn't care less. "What do you want?" Izuku spat, not looking at the demon and keeping his head down, not bothering to look at the demon in front of him. "Have you come here to kill me? Because I'd gladly let you," Izuku says, as the demon bursts into laughter, to which Izuku scoffs in response to. "What are you here for then?" "I am here to simply ask a question," the demon says, grinning, though Izuku does not see it and raises a brow. Izuku then sighs and stays silent, a signal for the demon to ask his question. "Let me ask you, Midoriya Izuku. How do you feel?" "'Cause I am really pissed off. I have been angry for centuries." "Are you angry as well? Are you pissed, Izuku?" Are you?" Izuku then takes a deep breath, closing his eyes and reminiscing all the pain and death he has experienced. His friends, wife, son, and the man in the center of it all, the reason for all these deaths, the core of his suffering, Kayaba Akihiko. Izuku then opens his eyes and raises his head at the demon, finally showing his face. Izuku's eyes were bloodshot, result of the many tears he has wept. Eye bags clearly visible because of the lack of sleep, which was a result of the psychological torture he has been through, giving him endless nightmares for months without end. Izuku looked at the demon with only rage in his eyes, as he uttered the words, "Yada," Izuku says softly, his voice filled with anger. The demon's response to his answer was grinning widely, before rushing at Izuku, going into his body and merging with him. The process was excruciatingly painful, as the demon was merging with Izuku, their powers combining and getting exponentially more powerful. "Gah!" Izuku screams in agony. It felt like his body was continuously getting torn apart and put together back again over and over. His body began to heal, his wounds closing and his back snapping back into place. His heart began to beat faster, as more blood began pumping all throughout his body. As the merging process finished, Izuku looked stronger, felt stronger. His body looked like it was restored back to his prime. But even better, Izuku felt energy, adrenaline and raw power flowing throughout his body. He felt like his quirks had gotten stronger, and it felt like he had more. But the feeling was a fleeting moment, as he felt the power leave his body, because of the quirk dampeners in the cell. But the adrenaline was still flowing through his body. "Vigio, how do you feel, Izuku?" Izuku hears the demon's voice, and looks around in confusion, trying to find the source of the voice. "Vigio, I have merged with you, so I am now one with you, our powers and subconscious intertwined. We can talk to each other through your mind, making communication much easier. Now I'll ask again, Izuku, how do you feel?" "It felt great," Izuku exclaims, panting hardly, due to the excruciating pain he had just went through. "So what now?" "Vigio, now, we break out." "How?" Izuku asks, bewildered, panting heavily. He has been healed, but there were quirk dampeners in the room, so there was no way he could break the chains without his quirk, as he still hasn't regained even half of his strength yet. "Vigio, use your anger, Izuku." Izuku tries to break it continuously, but the chains barely move. Izuku begins to get frustrated, but calms himself, taking deep breaths. Izuku closes his eyes, thinking of Kayaba and everything he did, making himself angry. Now, gathering all his strength and anger, trying to break his chains, Izuku roars out in rage and tries once more to break his chains. "Vigio, let the rage fuel you." Izuku keeps trying to break his chains, but to no avail, though that does not deter him, as he keeps going, trying to break his restraints and free himself. "Vigio, break your chains, Izuku. You've been holding back your anger for far too long. Break them." With one huge roar, Izuku breaks the chains attached on his arms and hands, the chains on his legs and feet following, and lastly, breaking the chains on his neck, freeing his whole body from the restraints. Almost immediately after breaking his chains, the sound of several footsteps could be heard from outside his cell, meaning the guards were right outside the door. "Oh no, the guards are here. Whatever the fuck will we do?" Izuku says sarcastically, before a smirk creeps up his face, getting ready to unleash his anger on the unlucky victims on the other side. "Vigio, let there be carnage." That was all Izuku needed to hear, as he kicked his cell's door open, revealing a small army of guards waiting for him with their guns, all aiming at Izuku. He walked out of his cell slowly, as he felt a surge of power rushing in him like waves, the quirk dampeners not affecting him anymore. "Put your hands in the air and go back to your cell," one of the guards in front of Izuku shouts, but he ignores him and closes his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm back," Izuku says, opening his eyes, showing that they have changed, his eyes turning all red, spooking most of the guards as they prepare to open fire. Izuku's body starts to transform, his body starting to get bigger, as the shadows surround his body, evaporating to mist the further away from his body. After the transformation, the guards were now scared shitless. The thing in front of them couldn't even be considered human anymore. Izuku was much taller and bigger now, his whole body shrouded in darkness, his prison clothes transformed with him, now turning into a black cloak covering his head, his teeth becoming sharper, as he grins crookedly, frightening the guards in front of him even more. Fire. The guards snapped back into reality, hearing the command, as they opened fire on Izuku. Izuku, though, did not stand still and let himself get shot, instantly rushing the army in front of him and unleashing chaos and carnage. It was a massacre, limbs and bodies being torn apart, heads ripped off. The guards stood no chance against Izuku. Soon enough, blood-curdling screams of agony echoed all throughout the prison, guards begging for their lives to be spared, but were only met with a painful death. Izuku looked around at the bloodshed he had caused, sniffing the air, smelling the abundant scent of blood, as he begins to laugh hysterically, spinning around in glee. He felt like he should feel guilty or horrified at what he did. But in truth, he felt happy. He felt like he wanted more of this. He wanted to hear more of those screams, more bloodshed, more death. As Izuku was spinning around like a child, a guard gravely wounded among the piles of bodies and limbs scattered all around the prison opens his eyes after having been knocked out. The guard was horrified to even comprehend the sight right in front of him. So many bodies, arms, legs, organs, heads all strewn all over the prison, decorating it like some kind of morbid painting. It made the guard want to throw up. But he calmed himself. Looking at the center of all this carnage, amidst all the bodies, there stood Izuku still spinning around in glee. The guard shakily went to grab his gun and aimed it at Izuku. "Vigio, I smell fear." Izuku stopped spinning, smelling fear as well, looking around to quickly find the one guard left alive. Izuku runs at the guard, as the guard repeatedly shoots at Izuku, but the bullets have no effect on him. Now Izuku was in front of the guard. The guard had stopped firing, running out of ammunition, as the guard stood paralyzed in fear. Izuku then lifts the guard up by his neck, as the guard, with one last attempt of desperation, pulls out a knife and stabs Izuku, but to no avail once again. "What are you?" the guard stutters, as Izuku smirks. "I am the vengeful one," Izuku answers the guard, before breaking his neck easily, killing the last guard left alive. After killing the guard, Izuku then walks over to the only way out of the pit, a huge hole, revealing the outside world and the only way to escape, to climb. As Izuku is about to just jump out of the pit, the demon leaves his body reverting back to its original form. As Izuku is forced on his knee, a sudden pain appearing in his abdomen. Looking down, seeing a few bullets inside him, and the same knife that the guard earlier stabbed him with, as Izuku began to bleed, Izuku painfully took out the knife from his body and threw it. Now looking at the demon. "Why did you do that?" Izuku asks, panting heavily. "Your transformation is not complete, not yet. You may have killed all those guards, but you were being insane. I don't want you insane. I want you angry. Now prove your resolve to me." "How?" "Make the climb. Climb out of this pit on your own, using only your anger to fuel you. Escape this prison, as a new man," the demon instructs, as Izuku looks at his hands, realizing how he has acted earlier. Izuku closes his eyes, clenching his fists tightly, as he gets ready to make the climb. Izuku thinks about Kayaba, and how he wants to kill him and his son. Izuku opens his eyes, with a newfound determination and resolve, his eyes burning with a passion. Seeing the look on his eyes, the demon smirks widely, watching Izuku walking over to the edges of the hole, about to make the climb, as a voice begins echoing out. "Desi, Desi, Basara, Basara, Desi, Basara." Izuku looks around, confused, trying to find the source of the chant, as the demon laughs in glee. "You hear it too. Good," the demon says, laughing and screaming in joy, stretching his arms out. "These are the souls in hell, who have been cast aside, forgotten, thrown away, broken by society. We have been waiting for centuries, and we have finally found you. Our successor, Midoriya Izuku, arise. My fellow brothers and sisters await for their vengeance to be sated. Arise and inherit our anger. Our rage for this god-forsaken society that made me. Arise." The demon shouts, as Izuku is climbing, hearing the chants get louder and louder. "Desi Desi Basara Basara. Desi 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 Desi Basara Basara." Izuku keeps climbing, as the chants keep going and getting louder. Each time he gets closer to the surface. "Desi Desi Basara Basara. Desi 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 desi basara basara. The chants getting louder and louder. As the demon below watching Izuku joins in the chants and watches. As Izuku gets closer and closer to his freedom. Desi desi basara basara. 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 Arise, arise, arise. The demon shouts out, joining the other vengeful spirits chanting, cheering for Izuku. Izuku then stops for a second, as he was so close to the surface. The only thing between him and freedom was a gap, which he has to jump across to reach a ledge he can grab on. The chants then become silent, as Izuku takes a deep breath before jumping, successfully reaching the ledge, grabbing on it, as the chants turn into a cheer. Yeah, Izuku climbs up another ledge, grabbing on the edges, as he reaches the top of the hole. Izuku was at long last free, and he was angry. Izuku closed his eyes, gripping his fists so much, they start to draw blood. Izuku ignores the blood dripping from his previous wounds and hands, taking a deep breath of the air, which he has not breathed in for months. Seeing Izuku reach the top, the demon grins before jumping all the way up to the top, going into Izuku's body once more, reuniting with him, as Izuku starts walking in a straight direction on the endless sight of sand in the desert. I'm coming for you. Izuku was now free. Free from his chains and his prison, as he escaped the pit with a newfound goal. He didn't want to die anymore. Now he wants vengeance, and he was going to get it. Nothing and no one is going to stand in his way. Chapter 7. Welcome home. A man wearing a standard prisoner's attire full of bullet holes walks through the streets of Musatafu, his face covered in darkness and blood dripping down his hands, as the bystanders give him fearful stares, while trying to avoid him. The man did not notice the odd looks he was getting though, as he was more preoccupied talking to the voice in his head. Izuku thoughts. So what do I call you? I mean, I can't just keep calling you the vengeful one. VGO thoughts. I don't know. I've never been given a name. Izuku then began to think of a name, as he was walking towards his house, still ignoring the looks the people around him were giving. Izuku thoughts. Why don't I call you Ikari? It means anger. What do you think? VGO thoughts. Ikarim. Seems fitting. I like it. Izuku chuckled a little, as he and Ikari talked more and more, while walking to his old home. For a short span of time, all his grief, anger, regret, and sadness dissipated. Simply talking with Ikari, like getting to know a stranger he just met, laughing a lot on the way. Meanwhile, in his own penthouse overlooking the city, Kayaba had just heard the news of Izuku escaping the pit. Oh, I see, Kayaba says, almost at a loss for words, hearing that all the guards he had kept there to look after Izuku and make sure he didn't escape were all brutally murdered. Kayaba then hung up the phone, putting it back into his pocket, before standing silently still, as a man walked over to him. Sir, I have good news. You won the election for the association's president once again. The others had dropped out. I mean, it's not like you gave any of them much of a choice, the man says cheerily, behind Kayaba. He, however, does not respond and still stays quiet, as the man looks confused. Congratulations. Sir? The man asks, as finally Kayaba gets snapped back into reality and speaks up. It seems our dear old friend, Izuku, has escaped the pit, Kayaba says, bearing the bad news, as the man widens his eyes. What are we going to do? The man asks, knowing what Kayaba has done to Izuku, also knowing what power Izuku possesses, fearful that Izuku will most definitely go to Kayaba for revenge, which will get him caught in the crossfire, as Kayaba is his boss and his job is to protect him. Kayaba seems to dwell in his thoughts, thinking of his next move, as he knows firsthand the quirks Izuku has, and how angry Izuku must be for what he and his son did. Kayaba then slowly turns around, looking his bodyguard in the eyes, with a serious face. Task your crew to find and kill Izuku. He must be in Musatafu by now, as he is probably staying at his old house, Kayaba instructs, knowing where Izuku could be. How many should I send? The man stutters nervously. How many do you have? Kayaba says, as he knew not to underestimate his enemies, and he knows what Izuku can do. The man then runs off, going to do Kayaba's bidding, and instruct his men to hunt down the former symbol of peace. The sky starts getting dark, the sun setting, marking the beginning of a long night ahead. Line break. Izuku has just finished taking a shower to rinse off all the dirt and blood, now dressed in a black three-piece suit. Izuku is currently sitting on the edge of his bed, looking at his hands, while wondering what his new quirks are. Izuku thoughts. Hey Ikari. Ikari thoughts. Yes. Izuku thoughts. What are my new quirks? Ikari thoughts. Actually, I don't know. I've never had a host before, so all of this is fairly new to me. Izuku thoughts. Izuku was cut off, as he felt a slight pain in his mind. Izuku realized his danger sense was acting up, meaning there were potential threats nearby. Izuku thoughts. It seems that I'll be having some guests soon. Izuku then stood up quietly and, without making a sound, switched the lights off, as he went to prepare for the incoming break-in. Outside of Izuku's home, multiple groups of men clad in black outfits with ski masks, equipped with guns, stealthily made their way into his home, spreading out through the house, quietly looking for Izuku. One team was searching the backyard, another was in the kitchen, while another was searching the rooms. One of the men broke away from the others to check the last room, as he was about to go inside. Before even putting his hand on the doorknob, a huge black hand punched through the wall of the room, grabbing his head, as the man got pulled into the room. Izuku looked fully transformed, his head almost reaching the rooftop, as he was holding the man up by his neck. The loud noise of the wall breaking alarmed the other men, as they rushed to go to the source. Izuku then easily breaks the man's neck, killing him, before throwing the dead corpse to the side, as he goes to fight the other intruders, trespassing in his home. Izuku was met with a riddle of bullets being fired at him once he left the room. One of the teams was waiting for him, while the others were running to his location. Izuku then put up his hands to block the bullets, before rushing the nearest man, reaching his hand out to grab him. But as he did that, something happened. His nails began to grow, getting longer and sharper, and as he reached the man, his nails had already impaled him. Izuku then pulled his hand out of the man's chest, as his dead body dropped. Izuku took a moment to look at his long nails, not minding the men behind him firing repeatedly, as he grins widely, turning around, showing off his crooked teeth to the men firing at him. Sweet, Izuku says, like a child getting a new toy, as he rushed the men in front of him, cutting them up with his nails. Impaling most of them, cutting off some of their limbs, and even ripping out the heart of one of them, making quick work of the team. Izuku adapted quite easily to his new quirk, as he shortens his nails, reverting them back to their normal state. Izuku then suddenly hears footsteps coming from behind him. Izuku turns around, seeing the rest of the men, most having flinched seeing his appearance, and getting horrified at the bloodshed he caused. But they did not falter, as they all, in unison, unloaded all their bullets on him, while Izuku merely stood still and let it happen. After the wave of gunshots, Izuku stood there looking unscathed and smiled widely. My turn, Izuku says sinisterly, as the men scramble to try to reload as fast as they can, while Izuku simply closes his fist, before opening it, something appearing from his hands. A blue flame, to which Izuku grins in response, before throwing the fire at the men. The fire catches on the men, as they respond by going into a frenzy, trying to put out the fire, but the flame does not extinguish. Izuku used the opportunity to attack them, killing them all easily with his nails. Izuku hears the sounds of more men coming for backup. Unfortunately for them, they were running unknowingly into their deaths. Izuku began killing his way through his home, staining his home in blood, leaving a trail of corpses in his wake. At the conclusion of the massacre, Izuku walked around his home looking at the bloodshed, making his home look like a slaughterhouse. Izuku then hears the sound of cop sirens blaring, which he anticipated, as the gunshots probably alarmed the neighbors. Izuku then reverts back to his normal form, leaving his home out the front door, covered in blood, as he goes to a spot on the street which was shrouded in darkness. Izuku began to get sucked into the shadows, as he was being absorbed by the shadows. Izuku dissolved into the darkness, as if he was never there, leaving the corpses in his house to be found by the cops. Izuku's quest for vengeance is finally starting, and no one will see it coming. Izuku's new quirks. 1. Eternal Flame. Grants Izuku fire-based abilities. He can generate fire at will. The flame is extremely hot, even hotter than Dabai's flames. The difference of this quirk with other fire-based quirks is that the flame he produces cannot be extinguished, unless the user wills them to. 2. Nails. Grants Izuku the ability to make his nails longer and sharper at will. 3. Shadow Exchange. Grants Izuku the ability to teleport, but only in places shrouded in darkness. There is no limit to where Izuku can teleport to, as long as the location is in the dark. Preferably used during night time, as that is when it is most effective. 4. Unknown. For now. 5. The Vengeful One Spirit. Other than being able to transform into a huge monster and being immortal, there are other benefits for Izuku when he merged with the demon. Enhanced superhuman strength, speed, durability, and stamina. On top of that, all his quirks have been exponentially strengthened, making them much stronger, as well as removing all drawbacks, so Izuku won't need to hold back, and can use all his quirks to their full potential without worrying about his body. Drawbacks. Having merged with the demon, all the drawbacks of his quirks has been nullified. But the drawbacks don't just disappear, they simply pile up. That being said, if the demon detaches itself from Izuku, all the piled up drawbacks from using his quirks will take their toll on his body. At his current state, if the demon detaches itself from Izuku, he will feel a bit of pain, but it would be manageable. However, at the current rate Izuku is going at, soon enough Izuku can't be allowed to detach from the demon, because it will surely cause his death, as the drawbacks would tear his body apart. Chapter 8. Blackmail. Of course he did, Kayaba says, staring at his fireplace, sitting down, while thinking of his next move, after getting the news that all of those who he sent to kill Izuku were brutally killed, and that the former symbol of peace is nowhere to be seen. What do we do now, sir? Kayaba's bodyguard says worriedly, stumbling on his words, as Kayaba continues to gaze at the flame burning in front of him for a short while, before he speaks up. Put Zuki in his personal playhouse and wait. Wait for Midoriya Izuku, of course, Kayaba states, as he knows that Izuku would come for his son. Also, get the real Steel Agency to protect my son. The bodyguard nods, as Kayaba lingers on his chair for a while, before standing up and walking over to his elevator. His bodyguard was confused at first, but then proceeded to follow him. Where are you going, sir? To visit an old friend, Kayaba says, waiting for his bodyguard to enter the elevator with him, before pressing a button, which prompted the doors to close and the elevator to descend down the building. Kayaba knew no normal person could beat the symbol of peace, so he was going to the one person who could help him kill Deku. Speaking about Izuku, Kayaba has unknowingly revealed his son's location to him, as he and his bodyguard didn't notice the figure listening in on their conversation undetected from the shadows. Now, Izuku knew where to find Zuki, and he was now on his way to kill the boy. *timeskip**. In Kayaba's plan to visit an old friend, he now finds himself currently standing in front of a dirty and dusty-looking door with his bodyguard standing beside him. Kayaba then knocks on the door, hearing an inaudible gruff voice screaming at him to leave in response. Kayaba, however, doesn't leave and knocks once again. It's me, Kayaba says, knocking once again, getting a short silence in response before hearing someone walking over to the door and the sound of multiple locks being undone, as the door opens, revealing a man with a fatigued appearance. A slender and tall, pale-skinned man who has long black hair reaching his shoulders with some noticeable gray hairs sticking out from his head. His face looked tired, like he's sleep-deprived. The man had an eye patch on his right eye with a scar underneath his left eye. If you look at his legs, you can find that he has a prosthetic right leg. This man was Aizawa Shota, a former pro hero previously known as the Erasure Hero. Eraserhead and a former teacher who previously taught at UA, he was now retired, living in a rundown apartment. What do you want? Aizawa says angrily and slightly slouched, like someone had interrupted his nap, while giving Kayaba a stern glare. May I come inside? Kayaba asks politely, which was out of the norm, as Aizawa sighs, before grumbling something inaudible and going back inside his apartment, leaving the door open for Kayaba, who enters the apartment along with his bodyguard, looking around. Aizawa's apartment didn't seem like the kind of place a retired pro hero such as himself would live in. It looked so old that it could probably crash down at any moment. It was dirty and had an unidentifiable stench that smelled like shit and piss of a cat. Kayaba and his bodyguard then walk over to the kitchen. Kayaba sitting down on a chair, and something catches his eye. In the corner of his eye, he finds a framed photo of Aizawa, looking more happy and less haggard beside a woman who Kayaba recognized, Emi Fukukado, a pro hero previously known as the Smile Hero, his joke. She unfortunately died alongside many other pro heroes alike who fought against Tamura Shigaraki. Seeing what Kayaba was staring at, Aizawa quickly rushes over and takes the framed photo away angrily, before approaching Kayaba. I'll ask again. Why are you here? And what do you want? Aizawa asks, wanting to know so they can leave him alone and let him live peacefully, while still keeping a stern glare at Kayaba. I have a job for you. And I am retired, Aizawa states, as Kayaba chuckles, disregarding what Aizawa said, because he needs Aizawa's help. I thought it best to tell you this face to face, seeing as how you might find it personal, Kayaba says, as Aizawa raises a brow in slight curiosity, but still doesn't give a fuck about what Kayaba is saying, and wants him to leave as soon as possible, so he stays quiet. Would you help me kill Midoriya Izuku for 200 million yen? Kayaba asks, as Aizawa was now baffled, but kept his stern demeanor. Is this some kind of joke? Because it is not funny, Aizawa says, glaring even more at Kayaba, clenching his fists tightly. Oh, trust me, I am not joking, Kayaba says, his face now looking serious, as he glares back at Aizawa, making the latter flinch. No. If that is what you came here for, then no. I will not help you. Leave. Go seek help elsewhere, Aizawa says coldly, pointing at the door for them to leave, as Kayaba sighs. You see, Aizawa, I wasn't asking, Kayaba says, snapping his fingers, as his bodyguard pulls out a phone and calls someone. In response, the door to Aizawa's apartment bursts open, multiple men coming through the door, as Aizawa gets ready for a fight, but widens his eyes, seeing the last person who comes through the door, one of his former students, Hitoshi Shinso. Shinso looked beaten up and bruised, as well as a few noticeable cuts on his face too. On his face, his mouth had a muzzle on it, to prevent him from speaking, or using his quirk. His hands had quirk-canceling cuffs on them, chained to his legs, as the men forced him to come inside. Aizawa was now sweating, while thinking of a way to save his former student, looking at Shinso and clenching his fists, seeing his attire, like he's some kind of criminal. What is the meaning of this? Aizawa says, reverting his gaze back to Kayaba. Oh, this. Just Kayaba was about to say something, but was cut off by Aizawa. Bargaining chip? Aizawa assumes, thinking they were going to threaten to kill Shinso if he didn't help them kill Izuku. But sadly he was wrong. Oh, heavens no, Kayaba says, bursting into a fit of laughter, hearing Aizawa's assumption, as Aizawa raises a brow in confusion. Kayaba then snaps his fingers once again, as the guards remove the muzzle preventing Shinso from speaking. Sensei, I'm sorry, Shinso says weakly. Hearing the first words from Shinso after not hearing him in years, Aizawa starts to tear up and gets confused, hearing Shinso apologize, because it all happened too fast. Kayaba's bodyguard brought him a gun, as he aimed it at Shinso and fired it. Asterisk bang asterisk. The sound of a gun firing a single bullet can be heard, along with the sound of a body dropping to the ground lifeless. Aizawa loses it, trying to run to his student's body, but gets held back by the guards, as Aizawa screams out in anguish, seeing his student killed in front of him. Eventually, Aizawa lost his energy, and the guards made him sit down on a chair. He's an example, not a bargaining chip, Kayaba says, throwing the gun to the side, as Aizawa's eyes looked like a mixture of emotions, because his mind was going through so many emotions and thoughts. Guilt, sadness, grief and anger. All of these were clouding his mind. As one of the men brought a laptop to the table, Kayaba opened it, and turned the screen to face Aizawa. On the screen, it showed the POVs of 6 different cameras, monitoring 6 different men and women. Their similarities of being Aizawa's former students was apparent. Aizawa was now even more worried, as Kayaba grins. You've seen what I did to one of your students. I can do the same to your other students. With a simple call, I can have them all killed one by the lovely Miss Nagant, Kayaba says, as the screen changes showing Lady Nagant in position on a rooftop with a view of her target through a window and a clear shot on one of the former students, Ochako Uraraka, in her apartment. All Kayaba has to do is call her, and she will kill her without hesitation. So, if you don't want them to end up like him, Kayaba says, pointing at the corpse of Shinso Hitoshi, then I suggest you cooperate with me, Kayaba says, as Aizawa seems to think it over. I'm sorry, Midoriya. So what will it be, Aizawa? Will you help me kill the former symbol of peace? Yes, I will. Chapter 9. Bloody Party. Zuki's Playhouse, a tall, seemingly normal-looking hotel from the outside. But in reality, it is an impenetrable fortress where Zuki can stay, having complete authority and jurisdiction within the building. Each floor, heavily guarded by security, and every corner of every room is monitored 24/7. There is no way to get in, undetected. Izuku is an exception though, as their security measures are not prepared for what is about to go their way. Zuki is currently partying with no worries whatsoever, not knowing of the dangers coming his way, and completely oblivious to the consequences of his sins, which he will soon have to atone for. He doesn't know either that his killer has already infiltrated the building. In a men's restroom, on the bottom floor, we can see a young man walking inside, the light on the last stall not working, while the other light bulbs kept continuously flickering, as the man went over to the sink to wash his hands. This man is Shimi Orikamano, one of Zuki's best friends who used to bully Hikari with Zuki in the past. The last stall on the left behind him is shrouded in complete darkness. As the lights kept flickering, Shimi did not see a dark figure's shadow walking towards him, washing his face in the sink, as it got closer and closer. After washing his face in the sink, Shimi looked behind him, feeling that someone was behind him, but saw nothing and noticed the last stall on the left's door, which was previously closed, was now open. A bit spooked, Shimi turns away, only to be met with a fist connecting to his face. The sudden collision makes Shimi groan out in pain, as he then feels an excruciating pain in his groin right after the hit on his face. His balls got kicked, forcing his legs to give out in pain, and cries out in anguish on the floor, as he looks up seeing his attacker. It is Izuku looking emotionless, wearing a black suit. As Shimi tries to speak, raising his hands, he gets interrupted, as Izuku grabs him by the neck. But not using much force, so he doesn't kill the boy instantly. "Where is Zuki?" Izuku asks, his malicious voice frightening the boy, as the boy quickly responds, fearing for his life. Og. T top floor. Penthouse Shimmy lets out weakly, not being able to breathe as he relaxes, thinking that he'd be spared. Shimmy was wrong, as right after he sold out Zuki's location, Izuku slammed his head down the sink, then raising his head up again and slamming it down, before repeating the process over and over again. Izuku knew this boy from the times he'd hear from his son talking about Zuki and his friends, so Izuku felt some kind of glee, seeing one of his son's bullies getting what he deserved. After some time, Izuku keeps Shimmy's head steady on the edge of the sink, using his one hand, as he brings his other hand right in front of the boy's face. Fuck you, Shimmy says weakly, spouting his last words, as Izuku ignites a flame from his hand and forces it on the boy's face, ignoring Shimmy's cries of pain and futile attempts of trying to escape. As soon enough, the boy's hands dropped, as well as his legs, signaling his death. Izuku then removed his hands from the boy's head, letting the body drop to the floor. As Izuku looks at his victim, Shimmy's head is completely burnt. No skin or muscle left. The brain is already half burnt, and since Izuku did not will the flames to stop, it spread to his entire body, engulfing it into flames, as Izuku walks out of the restroom. The sight of Shimmy's body being cremated can be seen, as he leaves and heads to the stairs. Izuku made his way up the building through the stairs, going through each floor quickly and undetected, as he could soon find his destination in sight, reaching the top floor, where Zuki Akihiko resided. Izuku had finally reached the top floor, as he was stealthily surveying his surroundings, taking note of all the guards and cameras, noticing that there was less security in the top floor compared to the lower floors, as the head of security assumed no one would be able to infiltrate their facility, much less get to the top floor, without being seen. There was a formation of guards circling the top, regularly looking at the entrance, as well as speaking quietly to their earpieces, informing their boss of any anomalies or security breaches, which, for the time being, there was none. Zuki was in the middle of attention, currently partying in the pool with various other men and women, while drinking a cocktail. Meanwhile, Izuku was currently waiting for the perfect time to strike, seeing one of the guards walking farther from the others, until the guard was out of sight from even the cameras, as Izuku approached the unlucky man quietly, stalking him from behind. Not having a time to react, the guard was quickly taken, with a hand from his mouth, preventing the noise about to come from his mouth, as Izuku quickly dispatched the man, snapping his neck brutally. Izuku then hides the body, not wanting anyone to spot it, as he continues walking around, subtly taking out more and more guards. Zuki was now slightly feeling paranoid, a feeling of dread creeping up, as he notices that the amount of security has dropped drastically after a few minutes, but shrugs it off, going back to having fun, completely oblivious to the man staring at him from the darkness with a sinister intent. Waiting for his opportunity, Izuku closely observed Zuki from the shadows, as a guard coming back from the lower floor spots him, deciding to stealthily sneak up behind him. But Izuku knew the man was behind him, waiting for the right time to attack. Once the man was close enough, Izuku perfectly made a 360-degree spin, catching the fist that was about to hit his back, quickly pinning the man down with one arm, and using the other to silence the guard. The guard's screams couldn't be heard, being muffled by Izuku's hand, as the guard pulls out his gun, aiming it at Izuku. But he pins the man's arm down at the exact moment the gun fires, resulting in the gunshot being heard by everyone, messing up Izuku's plan in taking Zuki stealthily. Izuku thoughts? Fuck it. Izuku accepts the idea of not doing his plan stealthily, as he starts walking out of the shadows, gradually getting bigger and bigger with each step he takes. All the people obliviously partying in the pool, along with Zuki, have heard the gunshot. The alarming noise prompted everyone to be silent, as the music stopped and everyone's attention was now focused on the source of two gunshot. The sound of huge footsteps can be heard, as someone huge approaches from the darkness. It was Izuku showing off his crooked smile, which was enough to frighten everyone. Majority ran for the emergency exit stairs, while some went to the elevator, all having a common goal, which was to get as far as they can away from the monster. Meanwhile, the gunshot which was heard earlier was also heard by the floor below them, as the guards there quickly began running to the penthouse to check out the reason for the commotion. Finding many men and women running down the stairs in fright, which motivates the guards even more now, quickly running up the stairs with a cautious stance. While in the penthouse, of course Izuku's target was Zuki, so he paid no attention to the others, going after his son's killer, making eye contact with a young man, which resulted in frightening the boy, paralyzing him in place, because of fear. Zuki! Izuku shouts out in anger, which seems to snap the boy out of paralysis, while also making him shit himself in fear, as Zuki runs away, going to the elevator, with Izuku not far behind, pursuing him. Zuki, however, gets halted in his escape, as while he's about to reach the elevator, a wall of flames stops him from reaching it. He panics, but sees the emergency stairs and redirects his attention there, running towards it. Izuku sees this and changes direction to chase after Zuki. With his superior speed, Izuku was able to reach him quickly, about to grab him, but gets interrupted as a gunshot rings out from behind him. The guards from the floor below had reached the source of all this commotion and shot at Izuku, surrounding him. With a window of opportunity, Zuki quickly runs down the emergency stairs. Izuku sees this, getting angry, as he quickly dispatches all the men surrounding him quickly, elongating his nails and cutting them all up. One of them, using the others being cut up as a distraction, gets near enough to Izuku and tries to stab him. But it was useless, as the knife didn't even penetrate his skin. Izuku turns around quickly and sees the man, holding him up by his neck in result, choking him, as he slams the man down the ground, using 2% of OFA, which was strong enough to send him through the floor and the floors below, making him break through every single one, until he reached the ground floor. This makes the walls of the whole hotel rumble, as every single guard in the building was now alarmed and began running up the stairs to the top floor. Izuku could sense all the guards running up the stairs, but didn't care, going down the stairs as well, because he didn't care who will stand in his way. He will get his revenge, by any means necessary. Izuku quickly jumped down the stairs, until he found himself facing over hundreds of guards, stopping him from going down more floors. The guards thought they could overwhelm him with numbers. Unfortunately, for them, they were very wrong. "Get out of my way." Izuku's cold voice brought a shiver down everyone's spine who heard him, as he reels his arm back and uses 5% of OFA to make a mini hurricane, blowing all of those who stood in front of him away, also creating a huge dent in the building. Izuku then kept running down each floor, getting closer and closer to Zuki. Each floor had multiple guards waiting for him, but all they did was stall him, as he killed each and every one of them. Whether it was cremating them, cutting them up, snapping their necks, or some other method, Izuku passed each floor, leaving only a trail of corpses and blood in his wake. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Zuki was currently relaxing, thinking that the intruder had been taken care of, because of the sudden silence and halt of gunfire. He was wrong, however, as Izuku had killed everyone who faced him, now using the shadows to his advantage, and reached the second floor. While avoiding detection, Zuki was sipping from a bottle of expensive sake, when Izuku had suddenly appeared, causing Zuki to spit his wine out from his mouth in shock, before running as fast as he could, but couldn't, finding himself trapped in a cage of fire, restricting his movements, as Zuki stood there, helpless and petrified in fear. Izuku could easily kill him right now, but decided to have fun, grinning widely, approaching his son's killer slowly. "Stop, villain. Your crimes end now." A familiar, feminine voice shouts out from behind Izuku, as he turns around, widening his eyes. For Izuku found himself staring at two of his friends. But, to most people, these two were famous pro heroes known as Battle Fist and Real Steel, or in Izuku's perspective, Itsuka Kendo and Tetsutetsu Tetsutetsu. The two also found themselves staring at the villain in front of them. Most would have been either disgusted or frightened, seeing his appearance. But for Tetsutetsu, his reaction was quite different from others. "Whoa, you look so manly, eh?" The moment Tetsutetsu laid eyes on the person in front of him, he had already begun to fawn over the person's appearance, forgetting that this was a villain. Tetsutetsu was thankfully brought back to reality, after a chop on his neck from his friend. "He's a villain. Stay focused. He's dangerous. He's killed hundreds of people," Kendo says cautiously, while also angry, having seen the bloodshed on the upper floors, and was disgusted of how any person could do such things. "Oh right, not manly, dude," Tetsutetsu says, getting into a fighting stance. Meanwhile, Izuku was panicking in his mind, not anticipating these two being here. Izuku thoughts. What are they doing here? This wasn't supposed to happen. VGO thoughts. Snap out of it. I don't care if you know them. Your son's killer had just gotten away. Kill them. Izuku was particularly annoyed, hearing that he had let Zuki get away. But he was more concerned at the moment, feeling hesitant to kill two people who he considers friends and good people. People who he has fought with, laughed with, cried with. But Izuku didn't have time to get sentimental or reminiscent. He had a mission. So he steeled himself and, still caring for his friends, tried to avoid confrontation and went to leave. But Kendo didn't allow him. Kendo stopped him from getting away, quickly going in front of him, as Izuku got more annoyed. "Step aside," Izuku says seriously, warning the girl in front of him. But she doesn't budge and tries to grab him, only to grab thin air, as Izuku dodged her, and was about to throw a punch with 1% of OFA just to knock her out. But his fist gets caught by Tetsutetsu. In response, Izuku tries to use his other hand in throwing a punch, which gets caught by Kendo, the two trying their hardest to push him back. But Izuku's strength is far more superior, as he adds more force, pushing them both back. Last chance. Get out of my way. Never. We're just getting started, Kendo says, grinning, as her fists enlarged, showing that she was getting serious. Yeah, Tetsu agrees, turning his whole body into steel, as the duo then rush Izuku together, beginning the fight. If Izuku was going to be honest, though he was heavily holding back, these two were actually impressing him. They were like one being, both fighting so in sync and no wasted movements. Each went for hits, and when Izuku would dodge, he'd find himself trying to avoid another hit after hit. When he'd try to throw a punch, it would get caught by one of them, while the other would take the chance to hit him. Their barrage of punches and hits each striked a specific part of his body, making sure to not waste each movement. Their combined strength and teamwork were formidable. Unfortunately, though, they were no match for him. The two felt they were tiring the villain, and both nodded to each other, knowing what each other was thinking, and both, in perfect sync, went to throw a punch from both sides. But Izuku was done playing around. He caught both fists and grabbed both, before slamming them both down on the ground, which did significant damage to both, as both quickly recovered from the sudden collision with the floor and stood back on their feet, panting hardly, as the duo was getting tired. Oi Kendo, Tetsu says, getting her attention. I think we should do it, Tetsu grins, as Kendo gets the idea and grins in response. Seeing these exchanges of glances, Izuku was now curious to see what those two had in mind. The two friends then grasped each other's hands tightly, both standing side by side, as they both reeled their arms back in sync, and without wasting any time, both took a deep breath, before rushing Izuku, who stood still watching the two. Both Tetsu and Kendo shout together, as they put all their remaining strength into this last attack. Iron Fist Ram, plus Ultra both hitting Izuku straight in the chest, sending him flying down to the first floor, creating a huge crater and shaking the whole building, as if there was an earthquake. When the dust settled, Izuku stood on a huge crater, looking unscathed and unharmed, which worries both the pro heroes, seeing the civilians' frightened faces. But they weren't ready to give up, as both approached Izuku, getting ready to fight him once more. VGO thoughts. Enough of this. You are clearly being held back by emotions, so I will do it for you. Izuku was confused, but didn't have time to think, as the next few moments happened so fast. It felt like he didn't have control over his body, as he elongated his nails and rushed Kendo, in an unimaginable speed about to pierce her heart. But instead it pierced something else. Tetsu had jumped in front of Kendo to shield her, resulting in having his own heart pierced. Tetsu, Kendo screams in distress, seeing nails sticking out of her friend's chest, as the man in question chuckled. Hee. So manly, were his last words, as Izuku, who still didn't have control over his body, pulled his nails out of his chest, throwing his body to the side. Taking the chance, while Kendo was still frozen, seeing what had just transpired, Izuku quickly killed her, snapping her neck, while she was still in shock. At that moment, did Izuku only regain control over his body, as he falls down to his knees, breathing heavily. His recent actions replayed in his mind, as he stares at his blood-stained hands and Kendo's lifeless body, but doesn't get much time to. Hearing the sounds of numerous police sirens outside the building, Izuku then stands up shakily, before walking slowly out of the building, while still in shock of recent events, as he sees multiple police vehicles surrounding him, with the officers out of them, all of which were aiming their guns at Izuku, and at the middle of it all, stood Tsukachi Nayamasa holding a megaphone to his mouth. Izuku in his monster-like form walked out of the building, which frightened all the cops, as some began to shake and Tsukachi visibly flinched, but kept a calm demeanor. Meanwhile, all the commotion coming from inside the building had attracted the attention of civilians nearby, as most then began to gape at the villain's appearance, pulling out their phones, taking photos and videos of him. Stop now, villain. You are surrounded. Please surrender and give yourself up. Izuku mentally slapped himself at this moment. He had gone so far and endured so much. He wasn't going to stop now, as he began to run forward, alarming the officers. Izuku used 10% of OFA, as he jumped off the ground, flying through the air and eventually landing on an alleyway shrouded in darkness, which was perfect, as Izuku disappeared into the shadows, escaping undetected, marking the end of a long and bloody night. Chapter 10. A nuisance. After yesterday's events, it was all over the news. A new villain, one with such a terrifying appearance that would give even the most headstrong endless nightmares. The public has dubbed him with the name the Crooked One. Having seen the villain all throughout each and every screen in Japan, along with his kill count, being over hundreds including 2 well-known pro heroes, all in a single day of his debut. Most are now too scared to step out of their homes at night, in fear of coming across the villain. Izuku's debut has sparked fear all over the country, as many more pro heroes can be seen patrolling the streets around the perimeter where the villain was last seen. Meanwhile, many have also started to speculate things like if it was even human or ask questions like what kind of quirk the villain had, theorizing that it would be something strong. There were many unanswered questions with too little info to go on. Among them is where the villain was now. Well, Izuku is currently staying in a seemingly normal-looking apartment to not draw suspicion. He was sitting on his bed, staring at his hands, while still thinking intently. The previous day's events still replayed in his mind, feeling guilt and regret. Kendo's face, as she died, never left his mind. Izuku thoughts. Ikaru, why did you do that? VGO thoughts. Your emotions and attachment to those two clouded your sight, and let the reason for your vengeance get away. Have you forgotten why we are here? Have you forgotten the scum responsible for all of your suffering? Because, if you have. As Akari said that, Izuku began experiencing excruciatingly painful headaches as he closed his eyes. Images of Stain, Kurogiri, Toga, Dabai, Rumi, Hikari and their deaths flashed through his mind as a single tear drops down Izuku's face before he shakes his head. Izuku thoughts. Noi. Asterisk deep breath asterisk. Izuku thoughts. I haven't forgotten. VGO thoughts. Good, now listen up. I have to explain to you what your new quirk does, and I won't repeat it. Izuku knew he had another quirk, he felt it. But he didn't know how it worked. So he shook his feelings of guilt away for the time being to listen to what Akari had to say. Asterisk line break asterisk. Izuku now found himself standing atop a motel, looking around, watching civilians walk back to their homes, cars coming and going, as the sun had set, signaling nightfall, which for many was not ideal. Not wanting to be out during this time, in fear for their lives. Izuku was there, for the purpose of taking a breather, after having the recent influx of newly acquired info, which he was both thankful and afraid for. He now knew what his new quirk does, and even tried it out, but quickly regretted it after. At least he now has a clearer understanding and sight of his goal. As Izuku was standing idly, his danger sense suddenly activated, as a single bullet soared through the air. Fortunately, Izuku was able to dodge it easily, even catching the bullet. But after further inspection, in an environment like this, paired with the precision of the shot, and seeing from which angle it was shot from, there was only ever one marksman who could make a shot like this. Lady Nagant, Izuku says out loud, finding the identity of the sniper who fired the shot, gripping his fists tightly, before turning around, seeing her standing there. Izuku wasn't going to repeat his previous mistake, not saying a word, as he rushed the woman in front of him. About to transform, Izuku sees the civilians below, and decides not to go through with it, not wanting to draw attention, but didn't care, as he didn't need Akari's help to kill Nagant. The fight began with Izuku throwing the first hit, before being able to grab her neck and start to choke her, as she fought back, trying to release herself from his hold. I don't remember Lady Nagant being this unwise to approach me alone in the middle of the night, Izuku taunts, keeping a tight grip on her neck, as she chuckles lightly in response. What can I say? I saw an opportunity and I took it, just like how I killed your wife. Those words affect Izuku, letting his emotions once again cloud his mind, as Nagant takes the opportunity, turning her elbow into a rifle, shooting it at Izuku, which didn't affect him in the slightest, but gave Nagant the chance to escape from his hold. As Nagant escaped from his hold, Izuku quickly reacted by rushing Nagant, grabbing her sides, before judo flipping her, slamming her down on the ground, creating a small dent. Lady Nagant recovered quickly, brushing off her bruises, as she put her arms up in a defensive stance, before throwing a series of calculated hits quickly, each hit not showing any openings to cut it off from. But Izuku was always one step ahead. Izuku dodged each and every hit, while also throwing his own series of punches at an alarming speed which Nagant couldn't block. Each hit successfully colliding with its target, which had Nagant spitting out blood, resulting from her internal injuries sustained. And, as the climax of the fight neared, Izuku threw one last punch to her gut, before grabbing her by the neck, preventing her from being sent flying, then set her down, still not letting go of her neck. Izuku then leaned into her ear, deciding that he wasn't going to waste this opportunity. Where is Zuki? Fuck you. Where is Kayaba? Izuku continuously adds pressure with each second on her neck, trying to get her to answer him, as it gets harder and harder to breathe for Nagant. I'm not telling you shit, Nagant weakly lets out, because of the lack of oxygen, as Izuku lessens the pressure on her neck, not wanting her to die yet. Do you really want to die here? I'm fine with it. Even if you tell me or not, I'll still kill you. So at least give me something, Izuku says, adding more pressure once again, as Nagant stays silent, losing her breath slowly. No? I see, then goodney. Wait. Lady Nagant interrupts him, having made her mind, as Izuku lessens the pressure on her neck, prompting her to speak. Sigh. There's an old church near the Heroes Association HQ. What about it? It's a frontets, Nagant breathes heavily, not wanting to die. It's where Kayaba keeps his private stash, Nagant finishes, before closing her eyes, hoping she doesn't die. That wasn't so hard, was it? Nagant lets out a deep breath, which she was holding in, because of nervousness, thinking she'd be killed. Now I have no reason to keep you alive, Izuku grins, beginning to gradually tighten his grip on her neck, as her eyes widen in sudden shock, writhing and gasping for air. Good night, soon enough. She didn't have any energy left to fight it, as Lady Nagant's hand dropped, going unconscious. But, as Izuku was about to kill her, suddenly the face of Kendo appeared on her, which resulted in Izuku dropping Nagant's body, pulling his hand away in shock, as he looked down again, seeing Nagant's face, not Kendo's. Sigh. Izuku then looks at his hands, noticing his hands were shaking, as he forcefully stops them from shaking, taking deep breaths, while closing his eyes and reiterating the same words in his head. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. Izuku then opens his eyes to see his hands had already stopped shaking, sighing in relief. VGO thoughts. What the hell was that? Izuku thoughts. Sorry, VGO thoughts. No, don't. Just go and kill her, so we can go to this church and draw out Kayaba. Instead of following his instructions, Izuku instead just leaves her unconscious body on the roof, as he dissolves into the shadows. Reappearing in an alleyway near the Heroes Association HQ, Izuku easily spots the church, seeing it within walking distance, and starts to walk to it, but gets stopped just as he was about to. VGO thoughts. What are you doing? You didn't kill her. Izuku thoughts. I don't want to kill her just yet. I want to torture her later on. VGO thoughts. Huh. Very well. Izuku sighed, as he felt control over his body once more, walking to the church in a seemingly normal way to avoid suspicion, while making sure not to be detected by any nearby pro-heroes patrolling. Entering the church, Izuku sees a priest there who seemed harmless, but he could tell the men above him weren't, sensing them and how their sights were on him. Izuku quickly dispatched them, using Ofa to jump around, killing all the snipers stationed above with his elongated nails, before going over to the priest who stood still by the altar, still in shock. Where is the vault? Izuku says coldly, as the priest gulps, shakily pointing towards its direction. Thank you. Izuku slits the man's throat, before heading to the direction the priest pointed at, finding a wall. Izuku approaches it cautiously before taking a few steps back, reeling his arm back and punching through it, revealing a secret stairwell. Izuku then follows the stairwell to an underground hallway, leading to Kayaba's vault. Of course, those snipers from earlier weren't the only people guarding it, as Izuku finds more heavily armed men waiting for him near the vault. But their attempts at killing, like many others, were futile, as they all fell lifeless by his hands. Izuku painting the hallway with red, finally reaching the vault. The vault door was made of titanium and many more unknown metals, some made from a quirk, as the vault was specially made to be unbreakable, even if All Might or Deku were at their 100%. But then again, no one could have anticipated or prepared countermeasures for this outcome. Izuku slowly reels his right arm back, black and red electricity dancing all over his body, as he goes to hit the vault door. Detroit smash. The vault door blew right off, like a bottle cap, as Izuku grins, before walking in, seeing what the vault held. It contained a hefty amount of money, including artworks, boxes, photos, video recordings, and much more. But Izuku didn't care about any of that, rounding up all the contents of the inside of the vault into one big pile, before igniting a flame from his palm and throwing it at the huge pile, causing it all to catch on fire, burning everything, as Izuku walked out of the vault, looking happy. As Izuku left the vault, he saw that the sun was beginning to rise and sensed that Kayaba was going to arrive soon. His car drives through the road, along with other cars accompanying it, all heading to the church, while Izuku disappears into the darkness, waiting for his fateful encounter with Kayaba. And it was going to be fun. Chapter 11. An eventful reunion. Shit. Kayaba was pissed, being seen walking out of the vault room, having witnessed all the contents of the inside burnt, reduced to nothing, resulting in the sour mood he was currently in. He was surrounded by his guards in a formation, as he left the church, going to the graveyard behind it, where all the cars were parked. Ashes to ashes, Kayaba says, clearly irritated, before turning to the guard on his right. "Can we recover from this?" pointing behind him to the church. "Sir, you know what was in that vault, right?" It was Noth. Kayaba's head of security tries to protest, knowing he was wrong, but still tries, only to get cut off by Kayaba turning his back on the man, continuing to walk back to his car in an irritated manner. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Izuku grinned, seeing Kayaba in an irritated state, waiting for the perfect time to strike. As Kayaba was not looking behind, he didn't notice Izuku appearing from the shadows, fully transformed, and in an instant, slit the throat of the guard behind him. This alarms the guards, who quickly get into formation, a team surrounding Kayaba, shielding him, while trying to get to cover, as the others fire at Izuku. Seeing as the number of guards were severely small compared to the security in Zuki's playhouse, you could expect that they were easily disposed of. Izuku then approached Kayaba, as his guards went in front of him, trying to protect their boss, but of course they were killed quickly. Izuku killed one instantly, slitting his throat, and burned another to death, turning him to ashes, as he approaches Kayaba and his 3 remaining guards, until, suddenly, Izuku's body started getting smaller and smaller, beginning to revert back to his normal form, as the look on Izuku's face looked unreadable, almost stoic, turning around slowly to face someone he hasn't seen in a long time. "Sensei?" "I'm sorry, Midoriya," Aizawa says solemnly, as almost instantly after, Izuku's eyes couldn't see what happened next, being closed involuntarily. His body collapsed to the ground, unconscious. *line break***. In an abandoned warehouse, Izuku sat on a chair, restrained by quirk-canceling cuffs, as he woke up with a jolt. Izuku didn't panic and calmed himself, observing his surroundings, seeing Kayaba in front of him, along with 3 other guards and, of course, his head of security by his side. Which leads Izuku to assume that he wasn't unconscious for long, turning his head to the side, locking eyes with his old teacher, as Aizawa immediately turns his head, trying to avoid meeting his student's eyes, because of guilt. Izuku seems to keep a stoic face, not looking shocked or betrayed, as he turns his head back to look at him. There he is, he's finally awake. "The man of the hour, everybody," Kayaba says, faking his glee, trying to hide his irritation, failing miserably, as he snaps his fingers. A guard then slides a chair for Kayaba to sit on, as Izuku and Kayaba lock eyes with each other, both men not saying a word, before Kayaba chuckles softly. "You always had a certain..." Kayaba tries to find the word, while looking into Izuku's eyes, the source of his glare. "The audacity about you." A moment of silence occurs between the two, before Kayaba's anger finally reaches the surface. "Do you know what was in that vault? Artwork, cash, not without its worth, but the leverage I had on this country and my enemies. Audio recordings. Physical evidence. Blackmail." Kayaba's anger reaches the boiling point, standing up from the chair. It was fucking priceless. Priceless. Seeing Kayaba in such a way was fun for Izuku, as he chuckles softly. "Yeah, I kinda enjoyed that," Izuku laughs happily, as Kayaba approaches him. "Haha, yeah, I know you did," Kayaba laughs. "Are you really laughing?" Kayaba then punches Izuku with all his anger on his face, making Izuku groan slightly in pain, spitting out blood. Kayaba breathes heavily, calming himself, as he sits back down on his chair, before changing the topic. "So you escaped the pit, you impressive. So how do you feel after your debut?" Kayaba asks, as Izuku, however, stays silent, putting his head down, knowing what's about to happen. "I mean, killing your friends. How does that feel in your conscience? Remember last time we spoke? No? Well, I'd be happy to remind you. So let's recount it." This time with a timeline. Kayaba's face turns serious, leaning into Izuku's ear. "As a hero, your master died, and you couldn't even help him. You were useless. You just stood there as your own master, and the former symbol of peace died. Those scum you called friends, look what happened to them. They died, and you couldn't do anything. Your wife, who you loved dearly, died, because you weren't there to protect her. You were too late. Always too late. Like your son, who you met, when trying to move on, which is commendable, but, once again, you weren't there to save him. You weren't there to protect him. Once again. Always late. And now, you killed 2 people who you even considered close friends, who were unlucky enough to be in the same building as you. But what about your other friends? Where are they? They left you. They all left you. All alone. Because they know what I know. If you haven't seen the pattern yet, ever since your master died, this life follows you, infecting every single person who comes close to you. Everywhere you walk there is death. Your life has been but a trail of corpses of people who've been dumb enough to get close to you. You are cursed." Normally, Izuku would have been reduced to a depressed and sobbing mess by now. But as Kayaba reminded him of all their deaths, It just gave him more determination to succeed. On that. We agree, Izuku whispers darkly, as Kayaba pulls back from Izuku's ear. Finally common ground, Kayaba chuckles. I'll only say it this once. Izuku raises his head to look Kayaba in the eye. Step aside. Give me your son. And maybe, I'll let you live, Izuku says, as Kayaba stares at him for a moment, before bursting into a fit of laughter. Yes, I forgot about your arrogance, Kayaba sighs, before standing up, straightening his tie, preparing to leave. You should have just died in that wretched pit. And you're doing all of this for a fucking quirkless nobody. A waste of human flesh, Kayaba scoffs, before turning his back on Izuku, and was about to leave, but... A nobody, Izuku chuckles, mentally facepalming at forgetting who he was talking to. A heartless demon. Kayaba, Izuku calls out, as Kayaba turns around, telling his head of security to stop for a second. Yeah? When Rumi died, I thought my life was over. I lost everything. Until I found that boy in that alleyway. At that moment, I received some semblance of hope. A second chance at peace. An opportunity to grieve unalone. Maybe even have some sort of happiness. And your son took that from me. Stole him from me. Killed him from me. I'm giving you one last chance, Kayaba. So you can either hand over your son, or you can die screaming alongside him. Kayaba didn't pay attention to Izuku's rambling, however, and was just about ready to finally end Izuku's life. Kill him, Kayaba says, as he and his head of security walk out of the warehouse, leaving Izuku all alone with the two guards and Aizawa. After Kayaba was out of sight, the guards then pulled out their guns from their holsters, pointing them at Izuku's head, as he closed his eyes, waiting to hear a gunshot.